Hey everybody, how's it going? Welcome to the November Q&A. I think this will only be one part, I'm pretty sure. So we're going to get started on that. And we only have 32 questions, so yeah, it won't be too bad.
Should go pretty quick. Hi, I'm Kim. I'm David's wife. For anyone who doesn't know.
That's my wife.
And
Not just a stranger.
I'll be here reading some questions.
And you'll see periodically me drinking this special red juice. That's because we are now sponsored by G Fuel.
That's not true.
Yeah, it's not true. But I did work for them.
Yeah.
I don't know when that's coming out, but they sent a whole buttload of G Fuel they got to get through. They sent about, like 400 servings of G Fuel?
Something like that, yeah. At least. And that's why I've been putting it in the baby's bottle.
Mm-hmm.
All right, we'll just jump right in.
Yep.
Okay, first question is from Vincenzo Laruccia. Yo, Dave. Yo, Kim. I'm glad to be back here on this Patreon. Glad to have you back.
Yeah.
I was a supporter for some months, but then I stopped because of some personal issues. But your tweet about studying really inspired me to get back here, and I'm glad to see your stuff again. My question is, how did you deal with your procrastination / stuff that held you back to get into the production crunch mindset? I'm really addicted right now to Guilty Gear XX, and I'm starting to think the best option is to isolate myself and crunch a lot to really improve in drawing.
I've taught. I was gonna say I touched, and then I said talked at the same time. I touched. So I've touched on this a few times. The ways that I've kind of talked about this before have been kind of addressing how I got into the discipline of it, but I'll address it a different way this time. So I think that if I go back in time, a lot of the discipline and study practice stuff comes from skateboarding. It comes from having a variety of hobbies that I was really into. And if I'm really being critical of that sort of thing, I think I get kind of a boost from having a bit of OCD.
Mm-hmm.
So I ignored that for a long time, that I had OCD or that in any capacity, and then it became kind of way more ridiculous over time. So I've acknowledged that that's probably why I am kind of generally obsessive with a lot of things that I do. So in the past, what I would do is just spend all day, every day on one trick skateboarding. And I would do that, 8 hours straight. I would do that. And then I did that with everything. I practiced all kinds of gymnastic stuff when I was a kid. I was really into mimicking things from martial arts movies, and I wanted to be a stuntman. I had a whole bunch of those kinds of things that I would repeat over and over and over again. When I got serious about drawing, I kind of just applied that same mindset that I had grown up with of just that. I didn't know it was discipline. It was just what I was into. Let's do it a lot. I would like to do the things I see really good people doing.
Mm-hmm.
So that was kind of the starting point for having discipline. But when it comes to getting into the really hard work of it, I found that even then, it's still, after days and days and days of the same repetitive task, it just becomes mind-numbing, boring. You just don't want to do it. You want to do the things you enjoy. It's like forcing yourself to do, manual labor constantly. You're just kind of I don't get it. Nothing's happening. I'm just repeating the same task without seeing anything. And it just feels like menial work. And it's not me painting the things I want to paint. It isn't me drawing anime characters that I used to do when I was a kid. Those sorts of things were more fun. And it was easy to kind of veer off the path and be I don't need to study today. So I think that, again, going back to stuff I've talked about previously, starting some sort of study group with peers to kind of set a common goal, and telling people that you're going to be at a certain place at a certain time doing a certain thing, and to expect regular posts or whatever, or just a group that all holds each other accountable on
Yeah.
every day, just saying like, here we are together. Even in this Discord that we have for the Patreon, you can meet like-minded people who like want to become professional artists, and just say, would you want to start a separate Discord where we'll meet every day at this time to talk about what we did, or share work we did, etc. You can even do that in this group that we have. But
I don't think isolating yourself is the best, because then
Yeah.
you're the only person to hold yourself accountable. And if that's already not working,
I
I
mean,
think it's kind of nice just to they say the first step in quitting smoking is to tell everybody, because then if they see you
Yeah.
not you haven't quit, they're going to be like, "Hey, didn't you say?" And then you kind of feel that like guilt and that like, okay, that pressure, I need to do it because I told people I was going to do it.
yeah, I mean, the hard part is, like, I think about this with like junk food. Like, I have a problem eating like junk food when I have anxiety. The problem is that like if there is junk food and I have anxiety, it's like I would eat it, but I wouldn't do it if like people saw me, like I would be more conscious of it. It's like if nobody's, it's like an extra pair of eyes is the consciousness watching me do the thing that I told myself I wouldn't do.
Which I think like having kids has helped a lot too, because even though they're not so aware of what you're doing right now, it's like,
Yeah, it stops you from like doing dumb things.
yeah, because you're like, oh wow, I didn't realize.
Or like, I don't want to be on my phone all the time. They're
I don't
looking at me.
I don't want them to see these, like I don't want them to pick up on these bad habits.
Yeah, so I think if you can find any way of having a group to hold you to that, then that's good. And just regularly sharing your work in a group like that would be good.
And I'm sure other people want that too, so that might be really helpful just to,
Yeah. And living in an age now where everything is, vying for your attention at all times, it's super hard to stay disciplined and focused. So anything helps.
So good luck with that. And thanks for coming back. Next question is from Ahmed Al-Kirsch. Hello, Dave. How is it going? I have some questions I wanted to ask. The first is, how many manga comic pages can you draw a day? Because the last time you said about 3 to 5 pages, if that's the case. How did you get to that, and what's your advice on that? Another I wanted to let you know, Another I wanted to let you was your Patreon motivated me. It's let you know that your Patreon motivated me enough to be mentored by artist Ron Lemon.
Oh, nice.
Or Lehman. So.
Cool. Well, that's nice that you're actively pursuing that.
Yeah, that's really cool. So how many can you draw a day?
Really? Okay, so I can kind of go off of the Destiny comic as the last, like, very, like, if I had to put myself in a place where I'm doing a very detailed comic that's kind of in that black and white manga style, that would probably be the one that I did that was the most complete and had a deadline, so I had to produce a lot of pages in that style. Because for myself, it's like, unless there's some sort of deadline or I feel like I'm trying to hit some kind of goal, I don't do that thing of like, let's just crunch all of these pages every day. It's like I'm more patient with it. Like, let's just make these look good. I'm still disciplined, but not in the way where I'm rushing. But when I'm doing something like the Destiny thing, where I'm trying to create quality without going nuts on them, where I just spend forever detailing everything, which I can do, I would say I did 2.5 pages a day of that Destiny comic. 2.5 drawn and inked pages. That was what I maxed out at, I'm pretty sure. Sometimes you can do more, but that's kind of where I put myself when I was doing that, and I felt like that was probably the limit at the time. How you get to that point is a whole different story, because you just end up drawing a lot, and when you draw a lot of comic pages, then you just get faster naturally because you're doing so much. Like, before doing that Destiny comic, I had already drawn something like I always forget the math on this, about 700 pages of Steve Lichman, plus like another comic on top of that was 132 pages, or right around there.
That nobody has seen.
Yeah, nobody's seen that one. But you can kind of see I'm close to like 1,000 comic pages in less than like a couple years. So because that all happened in a short span of time, I just became kind of fluent in that, and it was less intimidating. So I just had to do it a lot when I did Steve, and then had to do it on the job that was the 132 page. And then that kind of just made it a thing where I kind of knew myself, I knew what I could produce, and then jumping over into doing Destiny, I had a better idea of how to do it, what I could do, and then I could knock out reliably like 2.5 pages. But that's what it took, was just doing it a lot. I'm not saying you have to do 1,000 comic pages before you're there. I'm just saying that helped me become a lot faster.
Well, and I know that you've mentioned it before, but on that topic, you had like an Excel spreadsheet, and that helped break things down, saying like,
Right.
This is how many pages I'm going to have. And then you'd have like each column be like, the lines are done for this, the colors are done, the shading, and then
Well, I think
whatever else.
I think that if you're looking for some kind of metric to get an idea of how many pages you would have to do, then I think that's a great idea of starting a Google spreadsheet, writing out your script, and then mapping your script in terms of whatever length. Like I'll open it up in Open Office, and Open Office has like a little note tool where you can actually draw on the page. So I would like section out each page, and I would draw like just the shape of a panel next to the paragraph or something, or the line of dialogue somebody said.
Oh, like in the margins, I saw you do
Yeah.
that, where you'd have like this would have needs 3 boxes to show like this action, or this would only
Right.
need one big image.
So from that, I could gauge how much of this script was a page of drawing. So because of that, having it broken down, I over time doing multiple scripts, I could guess by looking at a script and its length and the type of dialogue that was there and the actions needed. If there was a lot of actions, that could happen in a small paragraph, but that could be like 2.5 pages.
Right.
Because it's just descriptive stuff. And then the dialogue will look big, but it's really, not that much if you can compress it down. So going
Right,
off
like if
of,
it's like Steve Lichman and they're having a conversation, but
Yeah.
they're just in the dungeon and it's not changing scenes.
right. It's like having that all broken down gives you a better idea. So when I would lay those out, you'd kind of get an idea of like, oh, this is going to be like a 400-page book. And then
This is like a real realization you had.
yeah, and then you just kind of have to look at that and go, okay, this is going to be 400 pages. How many do I have to do a day in order to get it done by next year?
Yeah, by this date.
Right. And then you kind of have an idea of like, not what could you do, what do you have to do
Right.
in order to make this thing?
Yeah.
So that's a really easy way to kind of come to a conclusion of workload. And
Very organized way
Yeah.
too for something that is a massive project. But even in your small projects, try it, see if it works,
yeah.
Next question comes from Lewis Whitworth. And he says, hey guys, considering Kim is a health professional and Dave is a professional goblin painter. I was going to say partner.
Goblin partner. I am professionally having sex with a goblin on the side. I keep it professional though.
Y'all are I'm not illiterate. I can read, I promise. Ostensibly. I don't know what that word means because I've obviously never even seen it before. Y'all are ostensibly both pretty familiar with human anatomy. My question is, which one of you do you think would be able to name more muscles and bones? Me, obviously.
Yeah, I can draw.
You could
stuff,
draw, you could point at it.
but I'm not
and you
going to be able
probably-
to name
yeah.
every individual thing.
No. Also, glad to hear that Amy is gone.
Yeah.
I never liked her. Me either. I didn't even get to meet
I
her.
mean, Amy was great. It was, a fling for a little bit. Kim was
She
away.
sounded like a goblin.
Yeah, there was just again, it was a professional relationship that we had together.
Okay. He says, she'd always called me condescending names like her little elf boy and baby eyes. Actually, now that I'm thinking about it, that might have been my mom who said that stuff. Either way, I hope you two are well.
Well, I'm glad to know that, you've been fucking around with your mom.
Also, this is probably one of the first Q&As that we're not sick. So
That's true, huh?
high five. Next question comes from Nick. Hi, I'm new to your Patreon. Love your work. Don't really have a question. If you ever feel like drawing Akuma from Street Fighter, that would be rad.
Well, thank you for joining us, and
Welcome,
put
Nick.
it in the box.
It's in the suggestion box.
That's right.
Next is from, I think people were having issues because there's a couple people who were like, it says like, hello Dave, and then there's a separate comment, and then
Yeah, it's
I
because
heard a couple
when you
people saying that
press
too.
enter to do a paragraph, I think it just posts.
Okay.
So people are doing hey, enter, and then they're gonna type, but it posts hey.
Somebody else said that they were having issues on the Discord about posting their question, but not from that. They would say like they posted and then like it just wouldn't show up on the like on the page. So in case
Maybe
you hear
we
that,
gotta look at that and see if we're blocking people with profanity.
So Keenan Jackson says, "Hey Dave, how were you able to build a following for yourself and create a Patreon and everything? I know it's probably been some time since you blew up, but I've never been able to consistently post work online. Maybe it's due to work. I work as an artist for a studio, and it's very easy to burn yourself out. Doing work for them and for yourself, if you need to understand what level of art I do to really judge whether or not I can build a following, this is my work here, and there's an ArtStation link."
I actually looked at your work separately from, this
video. If you don't feel like checking it out, understandable. Just wanted to help with your assessment to see if it's the art that needs work or something else to build a following. Not really trying to promote my work, just getting a little burned out only because it feels like I really haven't been able to get much work outside of the studio I work for, and I just don't know what to do anymore.
Well, I'll answer the first part about building a following. It really is as simple as being consistent. You have to be consistent. In the beginning, I talked to a lot of people that were in the industry, online, not just people I worked with. So it was just a lot of fellow artists on the internet. We talk about things and
this is what, 2006, 2005, 2006?
Yeah, but it happened over the course of whatever, I was pretty regular talking to people for the first, I would say I actively was involved in the community aspect of it for probably the first 6 years or so, heavily. And then I moved away from that and became more of just a freelancer person who knows a bunch of other freelancers, and sometimes we talk, sometimes, whatever. And then I had a network that was also work oriented, where I'd talk to a lot of art directors, and I'd had a whole different kind of social group. So I think that you kind of have to more or less be a part of the group, kind of let each other help each other out. Other artists will share your work.
What about participating in conventions and things like that? Do you think that's worth it if you don't have a following, to try to expose yourself to people who wouldn't normally see you?
Anything and everything that you can do is a benefit.
Okay.
It's all a snowball. It just goes and goes and picks up steam, and over time it'll become something. But you have to be consistent. You have to be posting something every day. That doesn't mean it's new every day. Look at somebody like Carl Kapinski. Carl will post every day, but it's not always something that he just did. Some stuff's from years ago, and he'll just have something new up that's in whatever. Nobody from this social media cares. Nobody on Instagram cares.
I look forward to him posting that painting of Santa Claus and his children. every year.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that it's just a matter of consistently setting a schedule for yourself to treat it like a job, because the reason that I'm doing it the way I'm doing it is because it still is my job. I'm a freelancer, so that's part of it. The part of it is just maintaining all of these things. Like even this Patreon here, like as much as this Patreon is something that you're subscribed to and you get something from as like a service type thing, it's still me here talking to you, being a person. Like it's still promoting me in some way,
Well, and
that all
even
of that stuff does. Even though it's something that you're buying from me, it still is me getting out there and being in front of people and being relevant in some way for right now.
but the ratio of your followers to how many patrons you have
Oh
is
yeah,
not
it's like
it's not
1%
a
or
yeah, it's
something,
not a good
or
indication
less
of
than
whether or
one.
not you're going to have a successful Patreon. It
No,
really isn't.
I'm more saying that you just need to be active, involved. You need to jump on things. Like I would always do kind of the opposite of, like, this is going to sound weird because it seems so normal now, but back when I did my Ninja Turtle portraits, people who worked in my field, like, they didn't do fan art really. Like that was something you did when you were like a entry level artist, and you were just kind of doing it as like a hobbyist or just having fun, or it was like a deviant art thing, or whatever thing you did to like put it down. And I remember the first time that I saw somebody do it was like Marko Đurđević. He did his version of the X-Men, and that got him work with Marvel. So I think seeing that early on planted a seed in me of like, oh, you could do that. And that's cool. Like just redesign something like that, and hopefully it garners some sort of whatever outpouring
for
support
you.
online. And people are like, ooh, that's really cool. So I had always had that in the back of my head, I guess. I'm sure it comes from that in some way. And then
What's cool about that too is not even just like the artist friends that you've made have shared things like that, or maybe they haven't. It's like the people who have written articles on, like, I don't know, BuzzFeed. I don't know, like some of those like articles about you and your art that have blown up, and they're
well,
not necessarily artists.
that's what I'm getting to, is that what that did was it kind of made me think eventually I'll do that. So at the time I did the portraits, like people weren't doing realistic paintings of like, these characters and things. And you would always see movie versions of those things like Ninja Turtles, or not Ninja Turtles at the time, but things like that. And you'd be like, they get it wrong every time. But nobody's ever going to put in the time on their own to get it right. So, whatever right is.
Yeah.
But like that's what I had in my head. So I was like, oh, I'm just going to take time that I don't have because I'm a freelancer, and I'm just going to, over the course of a couple months, do a ton of TMNT portraits. I had just seen Rango in theaters, which was it was like the CG animated kind of cowboy movie with like reptiles and stuff in it. And it was really cool because it was really well done and realistic. And I saw that and I was like, oh, what if you did Ninja Turtles in a style like that and you treated it like very serious? And then I started painting them and putting them out. And I did a Bebop, Rocksteady, and Shredder, April O'Neil, and I forget who else. I did like a group of like 5 in the beginning, or 4, and I put them up online and they just blew up like instantly. Like usually when I would post things, they would stay within my community of artists. Only other artists would care about what I was doing. It was never outside of that group. So as soon as I did that, it connected to way more people and it got on like tons of websites. And then I was like, oh, I'm going to keep going with this. So I did a whole series. I ended up with 15 portraits that year, which was 2009. And from that, it just exploded. And that brought millions of views to my website. It was on like all kinds of blogs. And yeah, I just saw my work all over the place. Like it was on BuzzFeed, like you were saying. It was always on like Imager at the time. I saw them on like Reddit. I'd see them all over. And that was the thing where it kind of dawned on me of like, oh, I should be connecting with people who are outside of this art industry. Like if I want to maintain or grow some kind of like presence online and get more freelance work, I should do that. So
You know, a
all
couple
of
of like those writers on like Kotaku and stuff, right?
right, yeah, I would email Kotaku. I think one of the first things I did was actually email some people I knew at Kotaku and ask them if they could share my work, because I had done that here and there. I did that with like a couple small pieces back in the day, and then those went, okay on the blog. But yeah, the Ninja Turtle stuff was like, it gets on one blog and then it went everywhere.
I think at the end of the day, you have to like really realize that you're selling yourself too, if you're
Right.
going to be like a person online, especially. And I think that like making those connections is helping to sell yourself, because they're like, oh, you're a person. You're not just like this image that I see and I like hit a heart, or
Right.
double tap, whatever, you know? It's like you're making these connections that are real, and people are connecting it to like you as a person, and they're more likely to share it. And I think that definitely helps with growing your
Wake up.
growing your
It's
following
trying to
and
stop the
everything.
dog from snoring.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I think that's like something that you've been really good at doing, because I mean, you're good with business and you're good with people. I think those are two things that you have to really incorporate into just like building yourself as like a brand, or like however you want to put it, you know?
Yeah. It's like it's kind of just relating to people.
Mm-hmm.
Like you're putting out there what you're into when you do something fan art related, and it's something you actually enjoy, and you put yourself into it, and people see like that you, again, it's like you get it, like you get why, like it's
You're striking that like nostalgia nerve.
but it's yeah, it's that, but it's the thing I always wanted. So that's kind of what I want other people to think, like, oh, I always wanted somebody to do that, and you did it. So thank you. Like, that's cool.
Yeah.
Like, that's always kind of my thought going into it. But those sorts of things were really the things that got me initially going. And then it was a matter of kind of pinning things to the back of that, riding the tailcoat kind of thing of that, and doing other projects, doing your own stuff or whatever, and then maintain that momentum and keep doing things regularly, keep growing, keep trying, keep pushing for new stuff and growth, whatever. All of that will eventually lead to you becoming successful over time. But that was my course for, I probably started doing that stuff maybe like four years into my career. And I'm 16 years into my career now. So that's been 12 years of maintaining that kind of momentum.
Yeah.
And it's not like I'm the biggest artist in the world. I'm not like,
Well-
there's a ton of artists that have like millions of followers and things that,
And realistically too, that like is like this. You're not like, it's not an everyday thing. You're
No.
not like, okay, I'm going to email all these people at all these websites to share my work, because sometimes
No.
you don't have stuff to share. But like,
but you should do big
yeah,
things that are like,
comes in chunks.
here's a piece of material that could live forever. Like if you look up my Ninja Turtle stuff, if you look up my He-Man stuff, like it's tattooed on so many people. Like it's really weird.
Yeah.
So it's like you invest in those things. It's the same thing as making a book. You make a book once, a comic book with a story, then you feel good about it, and that alone will just live on. It could live on forever because it exists. It's a thing. You can always sell it. You can always use it as a vehicle to make a show, a movie, pitch an idea. Like
Yeah.
there's so many things you can do with it once you have the block of thing that you did. But
Yeah.
yeah.
Next question comes from Ash K. When you decided to become a full-time artist, what was the final push to make that jump? What held you back? And any advice for people who may want to make the same decision? You're kind of forced into making that decision.
Yeah, I've talked about this in the past, so I'll just briefly touch on it. I was trying to do anything to like work for myself at the time. Like I had done a whole bunch of like small jobs with my dad, like moving furniture and things, and he was always into like being independent. And I think I just kind of grew up. Well, my dad also used to steal shit all the time. Like he was very much anti whatever, everything.
The man.
He was like
man.
independence. Like, yeah, like be yourself all the way. Fuck everybody.
Yes.
Live for your own thing, and you know. So I just didn't really think about it, and I just started like stealing things when I was a teenager and selling them, and I got too cocky with that stuff, and it was just stupid. You know, it's like obviously you can't sustain that sort of thing, and that's how I was making money when I was a kid. And then I got caught, and I was worried that I would have. I got caught with grand larceny was the charge. I was going to go to court. I mean, I did go to court. Fortunately, nothing really came of it. I didn't have like a permanent record, but the fear at the time was that all of that was going to come
Keep
into
you
play.
from getting a traditional job.
Yeah, so I was just thinking like, okay, what are the other things I'm good at that I could do? Like what could I do? And I thought art was the thing I was most interested in, that was a viable skill, and I could be independent, I could exist online, and I could just sell myself that way and maybe make a living.
But
So-
that wasn't the final push. Probably living at home.
Well, that was a big part of it, but I think just having that happen to me was the deciding factor of like, I'm going to do this. Like
Yeah.
I had, you know, of course I didn't want to live at home forever. I was trying not to do that. And I was 19 when things really got bad. And then I just thought, well, I have this thing. I'm just going to put everything on it and just go all the way and study constantly. And I just did like, 14-hour days, like every day, just because I was, I don't know, like fear, motivation, but it was also a thing of like, I'm going to do it. Like I was almost like excited to actually have a direction.
Anything holding that? Did anything hold you back? Or was there any like what kind of
Everything-
obstacles did you have?
Yeah, I mean, you can,
I guess
mean,
just in the beginning.
yes and no. Yes, in the way that if I thought of it like that, then yes, but I never thought of it that way. So if things got in my way, I was very stubborn, and I was just like, oh, I'm just going to do it anyway. So it's like, yes, I'm sure, like all of my friends stopped hanging out with me, and they were like, oh, you're like trying to do this thing and you're not around us, like
You
fuck
think
you,
you're better
sort
than
of
us.
thing. Yeah, but it was like, fuck you, like you're not doing anything anymore, you're just sitting at home like working on this thing, like what's wrong with you?
What are you
Like-
doing? Coloring?
Yeah, no, like, it was that, like, what are you going to do with that sort of thing? But I didn't care. I was like, okay, fine. You all think that I'm doing this for no reason, whatever. I got a computer on a Best Buy credit card, and I used my tablet that I had gotten instead of a scholarship from my high school, and then I sat at home and I just worked at it for a really long time.
And then what would you tell people who want to do the same thing? Like if they're like, okay, I think I'm ready. I'm going to become a full-time artist. I'm going to quit my job and just focus on art.
I mean, quit your job, that's a tough one because it's just a matter of actually having some sort of skill.
Well, Dave Raposa told me I should quit my job.
I never said that.
No.
I would say that it's just the matter of discipline again, and never think that you're too late on anything. It might seem really intense and intimidating to be like having to study all of this massive amount of fundamental work. And yes, it is intimidating and it's hard, but you have to break things down into manageable steps, because everything's like that. Everything that you want to do that isn't an ironed out, clean path is going to be difficult, but you have to make the path for yourself in order to do that. So you have to have a structured schedule of what you're going to do when every day, and make it a job or like school. And I think in terms of medical professionals, just, you're here. So it's like, imagine saying you're going to be a nurse and work in a hospital, but there isn't a school for that.
Right.
But you need to know everything somebody that's a nurse knows at the hospital, but there's no school.
Yeah.
Like, how would you do it?
Yeah. I would
Like-
figure it out how other people did it.
Yeah, like, how? But how?
'Cause
What if you don't
obviously-
know anybody he's like, you'd have to go and talk to them. You'd have to like
Yeah.
start really digging in. Like, what did you do to like figure this out? And that's what you're doing here by asking a question like this. And those sorts of things are going to get you there. But because art school, at least I would say the majority of art schools that exist today, they don't teach you those things. They don't teach you how to become a freelance illustrator who's working on video games and movies and products and all sorts of things. They don't do that because they didn't do that. And so it's a muddy way forward. It's a path you don't quite understand. And you'll have to talk to a lot of people. You'll have to have trial and error with what works for you. You have
That'd
to
be
study a lot.
It'd be interesting if like nursing school was like that, where like, okay, you learn all these things from nursing school and it's all the fundamentals and basics of nursing, and now you have to go out in the world and start your own hospital.
Yeah.
Because that's kind of like, that would be the equivalent. And be like, wait, what? Like, I
Right.
just went to school for this. Like, I want to be a nurse, but like, isn't there a hospital that already exists?
Right.
It's like, yeah, but there are already nurses there. So you have to start your own hospital.
But that's how I think about it, because something like being a medical professional, if there was no path, nobody would do it.
No.
But because there is a path, yes, it's still extremely hard, but tons of people do it.
Well, and also let me attest to that age thing, because I thought I was going to be one of the oldest people in my class. I didn't graduate with my nursing degree until I was 29. And I had classmates who had their 21st birthday after we graduated. And I'm like, this is wild. But I also had classmates who had like 4 children who were like, some were in high school, and this
Yeah.
is like their 3rd career, and they're like in their 40s. And they made a huge change, but they did it. And now they're gonna, it seems daunting, but it's like, I admire them way more, because I feel like that's a hard leap to make, changing what you're familiar with to something unknown,
Yeah.
and sticking with it, and starting from the bottom again too, especially when you're like older and more experienced in something else, to be like, oh yeah, I'm new at this and I don't know anything.
Right.
It's the rest of your life that you have to think about, like the quality of life that you want.
And if you want like really detailed information for all of this, go back through, like click the Q&A little tab that we have. That's the tag at the top of the Patreon. If you go up there, you click Q&A, you look through all the videos, like the variety of ways that I've answered the question of like how to get to where I am now. Like, it's explained so many different ways that you'll be able to get way more out of that question than you will right now.
Yeah. Next question comes from Anton. Hey, Dave. Whenever I send whips to clients, I always have this thought at the back of my mind that I need to prove to them that I actually know what I'm doing. Imposter syndrome. Which usually, I added that, he didn't say that. Which usually involves wasting time overpainting my roughs just so that they look pretty or understandable, especially focal points like heads on and arms. So my question is, can you briefly describe what's your process for working with bigger clients? Which steps are usually required for your feedback? Do you send the ugly steps too that can look sloppy and awkward, or it's best to avoid showing these stages to people who don't know anything about art? Thanks. And Alfred said, great question. I want to know this too.
I do send, it depends on the person. So a lot of times it's a matter of relationship. If they understand you, they understand art, they work with artists all the time, they've seen a million different ways thumbnails can come through. So in those cases, you have a bit more leniency and you can get away with doing looser stuff because they have a mind for it. They understand what you're doing. For somebody who's like a new client, I don't tend to do looser things like that. Again, I kind of refer back to the Drew Struzan tutorial video I've talked about previously, his Hellboy one about making something look finished at every stage. It doesn't mean that it's finished like the final looks, but it's finished in the sense where it could be a style or it could be whatever completed it could look good at each stage, whether or not you bring it to the full final.
Like
But,
a polished sketch,
yeah.
like,
I mean, usually what I do is I will like what you did. I'll tighten up the face, I'll tighten up the hands, anything that's really important in conveying the motion of what I'm doing, or just strong shapes. I'll make sure the shapes are blocked correctly, and I keep it loose, but I tighten up certain areas just so that my ideas are actually coming across and it's not missing and just inexplicable, things going on that you can't really read. I make sure that the things that are supposed to read, and the things that you can lose, and I'll fill in those blanks when I do the final, but that the overall composition is there and they can kind of see it. And with like character specific things for concept art, I'll do the little thumbnail characters, I'll do a base body with a head and do a bunch of different iterations of clothing design, armor design, those sorts of things. But I don't go super detailed. I don't do any kind of finished things. I also don't really have imposter syndrome in that way, which everybody kind of has, I guess, a bit of that. But I maybe it's just because I've been doing it for so long, working freelance, that it doesn't really bother me anymore. I kind of have an idea of what everybody's used to dealing with, so I don't see myself as anything special. Like I'm not like a special case that they haven't seen before. Like most artists are. And also, if you think that way, you usually over deliver, so you stand out as like something else than what most people who maybe, some people don't have imposter syndrome or don't have that high standard for how other people see them, that they kind of just wing it. But yeah.
What about this question? Which steps are usually required for feedback?
What steps are required for feedback?
Yeah.
In the sense of your initial
Well, it's like, can you...
submission?
Yeah, like... I guess.
I mean, it depends what you're after with the client. Okay, I'll give it to you like this, I guess. So if I'm working on... I'm looking up at a beer thing that I did for Stone Brewing. I redesigned their gargoyle, which is like their main character. For something like that, that's the character, that's the face of their brand. This is going to be printed on everything. So I know just by talking to the guy on the phone that he wants to see a lot of different things. So he doesn't really know what he wants. And in a case like that, I will do probably 6 sketches of what the design could be, and they're all very different. I tried to come at it from multiple angles so that we have a different starting point for each idea. So he's not choosing between very little tweak things on it. Like the tweaks come later. So my initial compositions, if I give them more than one, they're not subtle changes between compositions. The compositions are very distinctly different. And that's just if I have multiple ideas. Sometimes if I'm working for Wizards or something like that, where I'm used to working with them, and I just know that one sketch I did will work better than any other one that I'll do. So I won't send anything else. I'll send one sketch. And I'll say, here you go. Like, does this work or does it not
sign
work?
off on it or don't.
Yeah, like I would rather do something from scratch based off of a denial of the one that I like the best, rather than give them more options and have them choose the one I don't think will work.
Right.
So I'll take that risk with a lot of clients.
That's Wizards of the Coast for people who don't know.
Yeah, and same thing with a bunch of like Hasbro I do that with, and a lot of places I do that with, that I kind of have an instinct for talking to them like, oh, they'll probably like this.
But you definitely send the ugly or like the sloppy.
Ugly in the sense that that's the execution. I don't send a polished. You're not saying I send an ugly, bad version of a composition.
No, ugly as in it's not like...
execution isn't perfect.
Right, it's not like the final.
Right.
You don't fully render something and...
I mean, even on...
Uh-huh.
He puts his fists against the post and still insists he sees the ghost.
You even went...
So, yeah, even on something like a movie poster, I'll still send sloppy sketch with like, this is the kind of what Arnold Schwarzenegger's face looks like. And it won't be perfect, but they'll get the idea of the expression position on the poster, those
Well,
sorts of things.
You got hired for the job, and also like think in your case where you have different rendering styles, you can always point to something and say like, do you want it more like this? Is this what you saw in my portfolio?
Right. That's actually one of the harder things that I deal with is I don't know what people saw of
Mm-hmm.
mine.
Yeah,
they're
and what
hiring me
they're
for.
what they're hiring you for. But
I mean, I hope that answers the question.
I think so. Alfred Manzano says, "Hey Dave and Kim, if you had the means and the team, what kind of video game would you make?"
That's a difficult question because I would want to say something like a beat 'em up, but I know that that's not true. Just because if an idea feels too safe, it won't do well, and you can't just rehash old shit. I'd have to really think about it. If
I know exactly.
coming off of my like instincts is telling me to do something based off of the way Shining Force 2 kind of did it, if you've ever played that game for the Genesis, where you have this almost like they do like this weird parallax background thing within battles where like your main character's in the front, the character's in the back, the character you're fighting's in like the background here, and there's like this overlap, almost like it almost feels the way they do, like if you've ever seen how, I don't know what they're called. I think they do this in God of War where they have like cutout puppets, but they're like layered on like panels, and they'll like, you know, they'll be like waves, like they'll lift sections of a wave up, you know. So it'd be like wood panel wave, and they'll move like this on like a theater. It's like that sort of thing, but an RPG, maybe something like that in the style of like a Shining Force tactical game, because I was always a fan of tactical games. Maybe that kind of approach with the 90s Madhouse anime aesthetic on top of it, with cool cutscene things, the way they did it in like arcade games with like sliding comic panels on the screen and whatever. Something like that is kind of where I would lean, and then I'd change it a million times as I went through the concept. What's yours?
I have 3. I
Can
have.
I guess?
Yeah.
Some version of like that Puzzle Fighter game, or Tetris Attack.
Yeah. For sure, because
Was that one of them you were gonna say?
yes, absolutely, it is the Puzzle Fighter. I love that game so much. It's so simple. It's so simple, but I would love to just like, instead of like the little gems, just do something else. You know what I mean? Like,
Can I
the
guess?
concept is there. It's like an amazing game, and it's simple, and you know, just do the art for it. Whatever, do it like a rebranding.
Can I guess
Okay.
the other two?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe an Elo Milo type of deal.
Oh my god! Get out of my freaking head.
And
Am I really that predictable?
the last one that I would guess, which I could be wrong on. I mean, I would assume you
I'm
were
gonna be
going to say something about like Breath of the Wild or Mario Odyssey and those like in that type of like collection game, but it could also lean more towards those like puzzly RPG games. But
No, Sackboy. I wanted to.
like
I was,
builder game.
yeah, I was thinking like 3 very different games, because like Elo Milo is still like kind of a puzzle game, but I think what's really so funny that you totally just
Guess 2 of them.
yeah. And I haven't talked about either of those games in like years, probably.
Well, I know you.
I know.
We're the same person. We're connected.
I know. So yeah, Elo Milo is like a puzzle game in itself, but I think what's like so attractive about it is like obviously very cute. Love that. But the music on it, like the like little music box thing, like so much so that I looked that up on Spotify and I like play some of that for Axel. And then Sackboy, I think that's like such a different game because it's like one of those like super interactive with the world type
Right.
things. And similar to Mario where you're like still, you know, going, I don't know what that's called.
Platformer.
Yeah. And but like it's so interactive and it's like a different character, like it's its own unique thing. It's not like a spin-off where like Yoshi's Woolly World, it's like a Mario thing again, right? Which is similar to Sackboy, where you can like interact with the different things
Or
and
Mario
whatever.
Maker is basically what
Yeah.
that game is.
Yeah, I thought Sackboy was like such a cute and like fun and just like I just loved it.
Can I say that I would want to make, now that I'm actually thinking about it,
Mm.
a Studio Ghibli style Breath of the Wild with like Totoro and like that kind of like forest and things, like different environments you can go
So
into.
who would you play as?
Like
Would you play
Castle
as
in
the
the
little
Sky would
the
be
little
there.
kids and you'd have to go find Totoro, or
No, not literally. It would be that feeling. Like I like they did that in Breath of the Wild. Like that's basically what Breath of the Wild is. It's like inspired by that, but more in the way that it's kind of like small towny. Like I like that like small town Ghibli feel.
yeah.
Ghibli. I still don't know how people pronounce that. Is it Ghibli? It probably is, right?
I think
Or
it's Ghibli.
Ghibli?
Ghibli.
Yeah.
I don't know.
But
I'm going off of Vietnamese rules, which don't really make sense, but like the TH when it's written is like a T because you hear it like instead of like the sound that how we read it. And so like Ghibli, Ghibli, you hear it, the H instead of like, I don't know, Ghibli, you don't hear it. You don't hear the H.
right.
Which I know that doesn't really make sense, and maybe that's wrong completely, but I imagine that's what it is
Yeah, maybe.
because it's from like Japan. I don't know. I just made that up.
Another one would be Tales of Destiny 2. I'd want to make a game like that, where it's an RPG, and when you get into the fight in the RPG game, it's almost like a brawler side scroller where you beat the shit out of the other enemy with like combos and special moves.
I think with the
That's a cooler idea.
with the Elo Milo one, we would have a team to make the music too. That would be like a huge part of like the production of the game
Yeah.
because we both like that stuff, even though I can't. But anyway, next question comes from Matt DeVitro. Hey Dave, I have been going down the rabbit hole of trying to understand the wonderful and complex compositions you use in your big murals. Things like the really awesome multi-character art of Marvel Capcom Guilty Gear has always been inspiring to me. What is Guilty Gear?
It's a fighting game. It's like an anime looking fighting game. It's
Like, this
really
is the second time
crazy.
somebody's mentioned it already.
You should Google it because the way that they did it is like their new version feels like 2D animation, but it's a fully 3D fighting game. It's pretty crazy looking.
Oh, okay. I'll have to look it up. Also, what did that other word mean that I didn't know how to read?
Ostensibly.
Yeah.
I'm trying to figure out how to say it. Like, ostensibly is one of those words where I just read through, like if it's in a book or something. But the way that I kind of interpret ostensibly is like in that context is saying like basically. It's like they're essentially the same thing, or that you essentially have like the same kind of knowledge or something like that.
Okay. Yeah. Apparently or purportedly.
Yeah.
It's a good word. That's a big word, little nerd. He says, I really like the styles of Drew Struzan
Drew Struzan.
and Noriyoshi
Arai.
Arai, Yoshiyuki Takani. I can read all of those as well. Do you have any advice on understanding what constraints or useful rules these compositions use to read well? Thanks.
Yes, I do. You want to, again, this is reiterating a lot of the older questions. So if you want more into this, I suggest, or you're interested in hearing more things like this, listen back through old Q&A videos because there's a lot of them. But color blocking is one thing that I do. So keeping everything to a shape, and you can kind of keep them in the same color area. So let's say there's a group of bad guys underneath your good guy, and then there's like two other elements here, right? All the bad guys can live in like a red hue somewhere in that range, with other colors too, but basically the chunk is red. And then the two elements over here can live in like a blue hue, and then your character up here can be full color or whatever, just the color that they are, and paint them more realistically and have these other elements kind of exist as shapes. The other thing is making sure that there's breathing room, even though those people that you mentioned paint wildly complicated compositions with a bunch of things going on, they still need to have breathing room. When you're detail oriented, it's very, like, I have to fight myself on cramming shit into a scene. You don't need to do that. You shouldn't do that. You have to create area for the eye to rest. So you don't want it to be full of things, because then it becomes too much.
Then it looks like a trapper keeper collage.
Yeah. I mean, it just looks like nothing. That's really what it looks like. It looks like nothing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like if you're trying to paint a shape, you don't want to put behind it a whole bunch of shit that hides it.
Yeah.
And you want to leave area of open space so that that thing can just exist. Like I always do that. Like my Metroid piece that I did, the big painting for Super Metroid, I tried to, in the beginning, put like a looming mother brain behind Samus in the background in like the dark. And I was like, that's too much. If I put that there, it's too much. Like it'll just look crazy. You won't be able to see, like Samus won't be the main focus anymore.
You said looming mother brain, and I just went
But that's
in my head.
But that's really like it. It's like you don't want to overcomplicate these things when they're already so complicated. And shape is important. So shape, making sure that the eye stays in your area of the painting.
Mm-hmm.
So don't have leading lines out pointing towards the edge of the canvas all over the place, unless you're doing like a starburst thing where the, where the lines come together is the focus.
Uh-huh.
But yeah.
Okay, cool. Next question comes from Jiro.
Cool.
Yo, Keem and Dave, would love your advice. I feel like I am in an intermediate purgatory where I can draw/copy really well from references. But when it comes to executing my own original ideas, poses, faces without references, they're flat and shitty. Was there a point where you ever related to this? Any advice on how to progress through it? I know I should probably just be more creative with using references, but this doesn't always seem practical for executing ideas from my imagination, or if one is doing tons of drawings like in comic book. Thanks. And Oronora says, I relate to this so much. Good question. I relate to this too.
I think that you can get into lazy habits of studying where you're essentially copying and then you're relying heavily on reference and the copying.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas just as much as those studies, the reference, all of that is important to your growth, the other side is a muscle you need to work on too, where you need to draw from imagination and just go wild with it. It doesn't need to be perfect. Just draw for fun, draw whatever you want, give yourself that break and try to draw weird poses. Try to draw all kinds of stuff that you would like to draw, that you see other people do. Try to do your own version of what other people do. And just, even if it's bad at first, and just keep going and going and going. It's like you're doing these studies, you're studying from reference, and you have a clear idea of when it's good.
Mm-hmm.
Because you can look at that thing and be, is it that? It might not be the same with imaginative work because, what does that mean? It's just whatever you can come up with and what's good. Like, it just doesn't look like the thing, the reference. So it's not accurate. It might not, it's not as satisfying. So you need to really work on that muscle. You just draw from your head. Mm-hmm. Yes, study as well as draw from imagination. But those things go together. You can't have one exclusive to the other. They're equally as important when you're doing work like I do for all of my clients, because I draw stuff all the time that doesn't exist.
I was going to say, yeah, you have to make it up completely.
Yeah, I'm never going to find a reference for a monster I'm just coming up with off the top of my head in concept art for a video game.
Mm-hmm.
Never. If I'm drawing like a sci-fi character that has all this weird gear and stuff, I'm coming up with the shape language for all of that.
Right.
And I'm pulling from a bunch of design ideas that maybe I've seen at some point, but have forgotten and just lives in my head now.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like you just collect a bunch of things that stimulate you, they live in your head, that you copy. Maybe you just read a bunch of like comics and things and you pick up stuff without even realizing you're picking it up.
I mean,
And
I
just
relate
do it
to
over
this.
and over.
I relate to this question a lot because I feel like I can only draw from looking at something and copying it, and it's not even that good.
But that's the thing that you kind of miss a lot of times is the quality that comes across when something isn't perfect. That is super important. Like things that are not looking good is better than looking real
Yeah.
in a lot of cases. So it's like it doesn't really matter if it's perfect. Like how many, like I brought this up before as the argument of Boris Vallejo versus Frank Frazetta. Frank Frazetta's anatomy, it might not be real, but it's so much cooler than Boris Vallejo's perfectly oiled up muscular guy in a loincloth. Frank Frazetta's has energy. It has this weird personality to it that's only his. Where Boris Vallejo feels stiff. It feels like it's static, kind of like both good in their own way, right? But one of them is going to be infinitely more popular because you're looking at like a piece of a person, and that's Frank Frazetta's because so much of it's just from his head. And the same thing with somebody like Mobius. So much of Mobius's work is just this person's imagination. So I think that muscle is really important to work out, and that you should put a lot of emphasis on that when you're doing these types of studies. It's very important. And just being realistically good isn't the only qualifier for getting a job. And obviously, if you read manga where people do wild things with the anatomy from their imagination that doesn't make any sense, you're breaking all the rules drawing that way just to stretch out a limb or put emphasis on a punch or make a dodge look really crazy. Like none of that stuff is real. They're just making it up from their head and stretching the limits of what they understand about anatomy with some idea in their mind, and it's becoming this different thing that is more like a feeling than it is correct. And that's, very valuable to understand.
Cool. Gnome God says, "Hi Dave, I'm going to be shopping for a new drawing tablet with screen and was wondering if you had any recommendations. Also, what was the push you had to start making money from your art?" We kind of talked about that. I find I am very anxious about even showing other people my art and wondering how I can take the plunge.
Being anxious about showing, I think you shouldn't feel anxious. You should just, it's understandable that you're anxious, but I would say you have to think about it in terms of, this is going to sound harsh, maybe, but that nobody really cares. It's all about how you feel. Do you like to do art? Is part of your advancement in doing this showing people? Is that a key component that you have to actually share your work? Then you should just do it and just fuck everybody else, because it's not about anybody else. It's just about you, what you want to do. You're going to get better, and nobody will remember your bad stuff. I have plenty of bad work that existed on the internet for years that was like my very early stuff. I was never judged on that. People never look back at that and be like, "Oh, I can't hire him. Look at where he started." It's like, no, it was the opposite of that. I showed my bad work, and then I just kept studying and growing. And the amount of emails and the things people would tell me about, "I remember when you were like this and now you're this. That's crazy and it's inspiring and I want to do that," and blah, blah, blah. Like a million messages like that through the years. So there's nothing bad about it. It's just putting it out there. Who cares what people think of you? You're not going to be this person forever. This is just where you're at right now. And if you're trying to do this, then who you are right now, it has to be good enough because you want to do it now.
I also think that's like a form of stage fright,
Right.
I feel like it's one of those things that you hold it so precious to you because it's like it's this thing that I love and it's part of me, and people don't really know this part of me, and so you make it precious. I feel that way about singing. I love to sing. I took voice lessons, and then there was like a concert where I was going to have to perform, and I was like, I have to study for a test. I can't. Because I was like, I just can't do it. I can't see myself doing it. Because it is that, like, really vulnerable side of me.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to be judged on that. So I understand it.
Well, I
But
understand that too.
I wish I wasn't that way. I wish I could just,
I
whatever. Nobody really cares.
I've talked about this before. I'll just say it briefly. My experience with that was as a kid, I always joked around with my friends.
Mm-hmm.
Except I was shy to joke around with like people I didn't know.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't want to come across as like stupid,
Mm-hmm.
or have that moment where people didn't get it, or maybe that isn't funny. But I would say all kinds of things to people that were close to me, like just jokes or impressions of things, or just the same way that like Steve's written, like that was just how I talked to my friends.
Mm-hmm.
And I remembered not doing it or feeling like I would
Like, hold it back.
stutter. Yeah, it's like you don't say it when you know you could say it and get the laugh.
Mm-hmm.
You panic in the moment, you don't do it. That happened to me all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'd see people that were friends of mine who, just by virtue of all of us hanging out, we'd all eventually talk the same, same sense of humor, all that.
Yeah.
And I would see them do stuff that I did and get the laugh. And I remember thinking like, oh, if I had just said it when I thought of it, it would have worked and it would have been funny. But I didn't do it because I was scared of looking stupid.
Mm-hmm.
But look what I missed out on. I missed
Yeah.
out on this reaction to a thing where like I had that joke. I just didn't say it.
Mm-hmm.
And that happened to me all the time. And after it happened so much, the way that I got around it was I was like, what if I'm just not me anymore? And I just put on like a costume or just dress differently or just make believe I'm someone else. And then I could do all of those things under this guise of a different character. And that helped me open up a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So you should do that and everybody will think you're a maniac.
What about a drawing tablet with a screen? Any recommendations?
That's a hard one. I do not know at the moment. I would normally tell you to get a Wacom tablet, but this Proline fucking stinks. Like, it's so expensive, and then the screens
Yeah.
get fucked up. So I don't know. I've heard good things about X Pen, and
But you can't
but
say one or
I
another.
can't say one way or the other. Maybe just if you can get something like an iPad for now.
Mm-hmm.
That I think iPad Pro is great. A lot of people have a ton of success with that iPad Pro and the pencil, and they work on all kinds of jobs using it, comics, paintings, everything. So I think that that's a viable option. I don't know why my chair is like nails in a chalkboard right now, but yeah, that's probably your best safe bet because there's so much success with it.
Yeah.
And then if you need to use a desktop and you can find like a cheap, like I would almost go back to using the whatever the one was. I think it was like the 27 UHD or something like that, Wacom tablet. That one I used and it never had problems with the screen, but
Yeah.
it doesn't have all the pressure sensitivity that the new one has. So it's tough.
Yeah. John Doe says, to whom do I sacrifice my firstborn to become better at art? I think that is, you have to go somewhere in like,
It's Beelzebub.
huh?
It's Beelzebub.
Who's that?
It's a demon.
Is that the one in Midsummer?
Is it? No, I
don't know.
don't think so.
That's where you have to go.
Oh, yeah, you could do that.
Um,
Sacrifice it to the whitest people on the planet.
Yeah. The next question is from Flame999. Hello, how did you study lighting and shadows? Did you study other artists who looked... Did you study other artists or looked at photography and life? Thanks. Sorry, I can't read.
I'm trying to figure out if there's any way that I haven't covered this already. But I will say, first and foremost, use what you have.
Mm-hmm.
Desk lamp, point a bulb at fruit on your desk, paint it, draw it, let it decay over time, draw the decay, paint the decay. I did that stuff. Add elements to it. Add a shirt, crumple it up, draw the folds, paint the folds. Add a mirror underneath a glass. That's complicated. Can you paint that with the light hitting it? Set up different light, get multiple lamps.
Different textures.
Yeah. Nothing has to be perfect. So don't think that you need the right tools in order to start doing it. That's my number one. Artists that I really looked up to were, I guess, the artists that were highest tier. So mine was Ilya Repin, a Russian painter, Russian realist. There's actually a lot of Russian painters that are very good for realism. I was very interested in doing realistic stuff at the time, so that's why I gravitated towards them. But that's kind of where I studied. That's what I was jumping off of, being like, I want to be like this. And then the other thing that I did to study forms and lighting was actually using a lot of CG models that people had done for like advertising. I specifically remember using Gears of War, whatever, 3 or something like that, to reference how they were doing all the little textures. Because usually you can find those high-res models in marketing material on Google pretty easy. So you'll find like these giant resolution pictures that they use to advertise their games. And then you can kind of see like the lighting set up in there. And I always felt that was helpful, just to make me think through forms in that three-dimensional space. Because yes, you can do that from life, but there is such a thing as like an optimal lighting scenario to show off the forms. In a lot of those 3D models and games that have that would really set it up that way to emphasize the forms.
They have like websites I've seen on TikTok of like, you can choose like shapes or things, and you can like choose how to light it, and you can choose like bounce lighting or colored light and things like that.
Yeah, those are fine, but I really think that to look at, like, if you're doing what I was doing, where I was really interested in like how they would light really complicated textures and things without it being like things that were looking more than real is what I would say. Things that aren't naturally occurring in life, where you're going to find materials to copy that sort of thing, is what I would find in those types of like marketing materials and whatever, because it was like a heightened version of realism, optimal lighting to show those things. And then I would not copy them, but reference them in similar ways in my paintings. Specifically, I remember using that with Garen, League of Legends painting that I did. I was looking at a lot of like marketing material for that, just to kind of get an idea of what would work best.
Cool. Next question comes from Frederick H. Hey, Dave and Kim, what's something you were really scared of as a kid from movies, TV, or games? For me, it was the Michael Jackson Thriller music video. Yes, I was actually really scared of that. That's funny. And the infested boar from Princess Mononoke. I didn't see that until later. Also, did any of those fears transition into adulthood? Thank you for all you do, as always. That's a good question.
Oh, man. Fears. I think I had a lot of nightmares as a kid because I watched a ton of horror movies.
Same.
Like, I loved, like, Nightmare on Elm Street.
My parents did not shield me from that stuff. I didn't see as many, like, pop culture-y things, I feel like. Like, I don't think I saw Nightmare on Elm Street until a little bit later. But when I did, I was terrified. I, like, later as in, like, I was probably, like, a preteen.
Right.
Not, like, when it came out, because I was really young when it came out.
Yeah, like, we went to the theaters and saw, I think it was the Nightmare on Elm Street 3D was the one that I saw, because I don't know, I think I obviously missed the first couple because they were made when I was, like, 2.
Yeah.
1, yeah. So it took some time for them to put one out in theaters when I was like a little older, and I was like super hyped. Like, let's go see Freddy in theaters. And I saw like Child's Play, all of those. Oh my God.
Chucky Chucky made me cry.
Yeah, that was scary. The first one, yeah, as a kid, all of those were pretty terrifying.
Mm-hmm.
But I would say my real biggest fear when I was a kid was being trapped. I had a fear of like.
I wasn't expecting you to say that.
What?
I wasn't expecting you to say that because we were talking about movies and TV.
Well, I was saying like a real fear.
Yeah.
Like, Freddy Krueger's not a real fear. It's like my real fear was like claustrophobic shit of like being stuck in a space, like in a box or something like that.
I was
So,
the opposite of that because I was so small. I always put myself in the smallest hiding spots.
well, my brother would put me in like one of those whatever you call them, like the tubs, like those plastic containers.
Like a bin, like a
Yeah, like
storage
a
bin.
storage bin. And then he would sit on the top.
That's
a-
terrifying.
And I would just freak out. Like I would just
Feel like you're gonna suffocate.
keep going.
It's the buried alive kind of feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get that.
So I had intense claustrophobia, and then that kind of just went away. I don't know why. Went through a whole stage of being. This is weird, but I went through a stage when I was a kid of just going at my fears all the way. I don't remember why or who told me to do this or how I learned this in any way, but as a kid, like I must have just seemed like a crazy kid, just really strange. Because I would just sit in the dark when nobody was home in the hall. Like I was scared of the dark, so I would shut off all the lights in the house, and I would just sit in the dark in silence for like an hour, just trying to get over my fear of the dark because I was so scared of it. Until it just went away, and then I would also walk around in the woods at night, like pitch black,
That's
just
terrifying.
to see if I could do it.
Oh my
And
God.
try to get over that sort of thing. And yeah, I remember I was up one of those times. I was up in a tree, and the tree was surrounded by coyotes, and my dog was with me, and she was barking like crazy, and they were like all running around the power lines in the moonlight, and I was just terrified, and I was like, why am I out here?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
I was scared of a lot of things, but I think that part of that is like my family, as in my mom and my aunts and everyone else, thought they all told us scary stories. Like
Yeah.
every single one. Like Auntie Jackie, yes, she was younger. She's my youngest aunt. And then like Luke's mom, Luke and
And they
Alex's
just
mom,
like teasing the kids.
they love telling us scary. My mom would tell us scary stories sometimes too. Like they just loved scaring us. I don't know why. And like they would
Why?
tell us,
It's fun.
we were terrified. They would tell us ghost stories. So I was really afraid of ghosts because like to me that was like a very real thing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then all the scary movies that we watched, of course. So like Chucky and what did you say? What were some of the other ones? I saw The Exorcist when I was like 12.
Yeah, that was one of the ones when I was a kid that actually scared me. And like, because it
Is.
was so boring when you're a kid, that movie, and then the things that would happen would be so much of
Jarring.
a contrast from the movie. I mean, obviously it's a good movie, but when you're a kid, you're like,
I think any of those things that carry over, I still think, I think ghosts are real, whatever. It's probably really stupid, but I do. And also I think that like,
leprechauns. Scared of leprechauns. Ever since Leprechaun in the Hood or whatever.
no,
Leprechaun
not,
in space.
no. I don't know. You know what I'm scared of.
Yeah. You're scared of like anybody being in the house.
That's a really like, yes, I am very scared of that.
Yeah, like if we watch something where somebody's in a house, it could be
It's like, can you turn?
I have to check everything to make sure nobody's in there. It's like I always am wondering about that. Like the logical brain is like, so do they know we just watched something about somebody being in the house and that's why they're in the house now? But
I don't know.
yeah, I can't think of anything that carried over. I think just so much weird stuff happened to me when I was a kid that I feel like so much of that got kicked out of my head. Like, getting hit by cars, almost getting abducted by people. Just like
Ridiculous.
real gross things happened. Confronting pedophiles. I don't know. There was so much stuff that happened. Bears. Like that. I think that the things that would have been fears just kind of went away. Where, yeah, like
Yeah, because your real life was scarier.
yeah, like being around like an alcoholic dad that like almost drives a truck through a house and like parks right in front of the door with a truck and then
Not
gets
your
out.
dad, someone else's
Yeah,
dad.
and then you have to like stop the guy. And that was, I would say, like, as far as something really terrifying, that was like the first time I experienced something where I was like, oh, this dude's gonna beat the shit out of me. And I'm like 12 or no, I'm not 12. The kid that I was with was 12, and I was like 15 or 16 or something like that. And I was like, this is something else.
Yeah.
This is really cool. But yeah, lots of scary stuff happened. So I think that made me less scared of things.
Yeah. And none of it has really carried over to your adulthood. I am still terrified.
I'm going to be disappointed if there's nothing after this, if we just die.
Yeah.
And that's the end.
Yeah.
It's not even a fear. I'm just going to be so disappointed.
The next question comes from Van or Vun. Hello, Dave and Kim. I hope you and your sons are doing well. I would like to know what struggles you have encountered since deciding to become an artist, specifically struggles that have taken a long period of time to overcome, if they were overcome at all. I want to compare the problems that I personally face with the ones that you may or may not have faced in the past or present. I would greatly appreciate it.
Well, let's talk about one that I'm wrestling with right now. I've had this realization recently that I'm afraid of being myself still, which is odd because it's like I've done so many things where it's me, but it's still a thing of like not seeing the value in myself of like, what if I just did what if I just did my own things and that's it? If I just did comics all the time, wouldn't that mean that everything fell apart? You know, that's the thing that exists in your head. That's like the
working for clients versus doing your own IPs. Is that what you mean?
No, I would still work for clients, but I just mean if the only thing that I put my time into outside of everything, like if this Patreon was just that or something, you know, it's like, wouldn't it all just kind of go away? And it's like, even though I feel very confident in what I do, and when I do my own things, I'm confident about it and I just put it out. It's still there. It's like this lingering thing of wouldn't it all just go away? Which I think is, you know, that kind of insecurity, it's interesting to think about because of how much experience I have had and how many things I've actually accomplished that have gone well.
I feel like
against
it's
the
not,
odds have gone well.
I mean, it's just semantics, and I don't feel like it's an insecurity. I feel like it's a hesitation. It's like,
Right.
like you're not insecure about it. It's more just kind of like, is it the right time, or is it like it just doesn't feel right yet? You know, like because you are confident in your work, but it's like there's just like hesitation about it a little bit.
But it's really coming out of nowhere, where I think that I know that's not true. I know that in order to do anything, like I know in my head that to write, like if I wrote a script that sucked and I just made the comic, to me it would suck, the script, but to so many people it'd be fine. Maybe it does suck, but it would be the stepping stone and it'd be fine because I would just keep doing things and keep getting better. And who cares? Like I said about studying and your early work, who cares what that looked like? Who cares what that read like? It's like you make more things and you get better. So you have to actually make those things that suck in order to get anywhere. And I can't talk about what I've been doing for the past like 5 years, but I've been writing a lot. And through that writing process, I've gained a lot more confidence. And even with that confidence, I feel like I still have a hesitation, which I think I can just destroy just by doing the things and it'll go away.
I think,
But
specifically with that, with like your writing, it's that thing of being like, that's a thing that's close to you that people don't really know you for, you know? Like I think, like there's so many other things that I'm confident in. I know that I can cook a good meal. Like I know that there's a lot of things that I know that I can do really well. And I can talk to groups just fine, like small groups. I cannot get on a stage though and sing. You know what I mean? Like it's so like vulnerable. And I think putting yourself out there for something that you're not known for, it's like, and I don't even know, like that's the thing, like I feel like I'm okay at singing, but I don't really know if I'm good. And like you are good at writing, But like, will other people also think that, you know?
I mean, I don't think good is subjective. I think I'm fine. Good is like, compared to what?
Yeah.
Because I would never compare anything that I thought of like, to any kind of novelist. Like, I'm not good. I'm just
And maybe
good
that's
for
why.
good for what I am. Like, I would be happy doing it for me. It wouldn't need to be like great on a stage in front of everybody. But I think in terms of something like a comedy, just to get it on the thing I struggle with, if I'm making you laugh, I know it's good if it's funny.
Right.
So I can put out,
Well, that's an easy measure.
right, like I can put out the Garfield things and just write like dumb little jokes and do Steve and write that, or write comedy scripts and get reactions. And as long as people are laughing, that's the mark of it being good. If nobody's laughing though, and like you're just doing this thing that has humor in it, but that's not the main part of it, and it's a mixture of stuff, then it's like, what are you really looking at? What is this? Is this good? How do people relate to this? What's good about it? Is it good because I'm being honest with myself and that honesty comes through? Is it good because you're relating to me on a different level? What is it? So that sort of thing is something that I struggle with just as a person making things. If I don't have that metric to measure good, then what is it? And why do it in the first place?
Yeah.
So that's why a lot of the things that I do end up leaning more towards being funny, because I just feel not just comfortable doing that,
but confident.
but confident, and I know that if I'm getting a laugh, it's working. So that's what I struggle with the most right now.
I think understanding where you struggle, being able to take a step back and look at it, I think that's a good way to overcome those struggles. Because then you can identify it and then recognize these are the steps I need to take.
Yeah. I mean, I know the
No
step
matter
is
what the
to
struggles are.
is to just put it out. I mean, that's what I'm doing with that Veil comic that I've been working on. And I wrote that a while ago. I'm just kind of executing it now, but that's what I've been doing, just putting it out.
The next question comes from Figmenter. Hi, Dave and Kim. Hope you're all doing well there. I have 2 questions, actually. Number 1, you've mentioned once before that you started out illustrating for people's personal character commissions and stuff, but eventually landed a project with Wizards of the Coast with D&D stuff. I'm currently making a living out of being a freelance fantasy artist, but struggling to make the transition from working for personal projects to commercial ones. Any tips for artists wanting to shift from personal projects to commercial ones? That's the first question.
I guess that you want to be in front of people who are hiring, first of all. So put yourself in those spaces. On ArtStation, I know they have a looking for work section. You can put your stuff there, and anywhere else that they have that, and make sure that you're seen with your personal work that you would like to do professionally, so that you can take maybe the baby steps that you need to take before getting the bigger job. Because sometimes it's hard to immediately qualify for that. But if your work is already at a similar level to a lot of people working on something like you mentioned, a D&D type thing, then you can apply to those directly. You can find art directors for that. You don't even need to have an email address that you confidently know is an art submission address. You can just ask an art director or a recruiter or somebody that works for that company, how do I go about submitting a portfolio for this job? How do I go about, getting feedback on my work for this? That type of introduction is relatively easy to come by now with Twitter and Instagram and every other means you have to talk to people. So there's so many things like that. LinkedIn is another one.
You should treat your emails like a tweet and give yourself a character limit too. Keep them concise.
Yeah, keep 'em short and sweet. Don't leave a paragraph of your dreams.
Yeah.
Just ask, if they would hire you for work, if there's anything, and if not, is there something I could be working on that would keep me in line with your style or what you would like to see from artists? That sort of thing is what I did a lot, was just reaching out. But yeah, be very active in pursuing it in every way. If you're not going to get work from those big people, then find ways to get in front of people who are hiring for smaller jobs, or offer that you do that sort of thing that you mentioned about what I did of drawing people's avatars and things. There's still plenty of people who pay to have their D&D characters made when they work, just for a person who plays D&D, like D&D group. Can you illustrate all our characters? Like that is a thing I've heard of a lot of people getting hired for.
So, number 2, since the pay for personal commissions isn't as high as that from commercial work, one can only allot so much time for each project. And I polished work tales a significant time to produce. Oh, sorry. Takes. And sometimes I find that, I don't have my glasses on. Sometimes I find that what people want in their personal commissions isn't really viable for a portfolio piece either. Porn. That's just my guess. I don't know. Did you deliberately carve out time to create fantastic portfolio pieces outside of doing people's commissions back then in order to make the leap to commercial?
I did do that. I did that on top of the work that I was doing for other people. So I would do everything I could to tailor the work I was doing for other people to kind of fall in line with the work I would like to do for commercial work. And that thing you were saying isn't always true about the private commissions sometimes being less than the commercial work. It was more often the case for me, at least back when I started, that my private commissions actually pay me more than my commercial work. The commercial work, like D&D, back when I started, didn't pay very much at all. And the same thing went for most of the RPG companies that I worked for. I actually got paid more to do private commissions of people's characters from Warcraft when I was talking about those jobs. And that was way more lucrative. And when I actually got into doing commercial work, I was pretty surprised at how much they paid. I was like, oh, well. But I knew that the legitimacy of working for those companies was more important at the time.
Like having a name attached to your
it would lead
resume.
to more things.
Yeah.
So yeah. You want to do those pieces outside of your private commissions if most of your private commissions aren't leading towards anything that looks like a commercial job.
Next question comes from Flo. Hi, what is your opinion on NFTs? What are you interested in? Are you interested in it? In me eyes, it's like a fucking scam. No matter how many times I process it with good intentions, I can't shake off the scam side. Every artist I've respected jumped on the NFT train.
Well, before I knew the ins and outs of what was actually happening with it, I did one. A friend of mine actually gave me money from Ethereum, like from their crypto wallet. They gave me money to post my thing up. So I didn't even pay to list it. I got paid from a buddy to then they told me you should try this out. I put it up. I want to say the time it sold for $8,000 or something. Like first day. It was so weird. It sold right away and it was so much money all up front for one thing. And I know that that's nothing, but this was like the first couple days of it really kicking off for artists in our field. So it was all brand new. At least to me it was. I knew nothing about it. I had read an article about it like the night before about how people were going to use it to create digital artwork and sell digital files. I didn't understand it at all. I was like, whatever, let's try it. Maybe it's money laundering. Who knows? And sold that. Was really surprised by it. But I don't know. It's hard to really describe how it made me feel. Outside of the morally ambiguous thing about it, where it's what's it doing to the environment, all the arguments that came out and talking about like what energy consumption is needed in order to run all these blockchains. Outside of that, it just felt really strange to get so much money for something that wasn't real. I don't know.
Yeah, it's
Like
not
it,
a tangible thing.
it didn't feel good, like even though it was a lot of money. But that's for me, right? For me, we're not struggling. Like we're doing fine. We have money. We're, I have tons of clients that I could ask for work. Like we have the Patreon.
Yeah, we're doing okay.
We're doing fine. It's like, so we don't need this thing. If I were younger and this happened, even with the morally ambiguous thing, I would not be taking a stand. Like I told you, I was like a thief before. Like I wouldn't care. I was struggling. I couldn't afford food. I couldn't afford rent. I borrowed money. I was like living on my own since I was 16. Like I didn't care. Like I was just having a hard go of it, and I would have taken that out for sure and used that money to then study and do more. But for now, it just felt weird. So I didn't do any more. And I was like, I'll wait and see what comes of this. Let's see like how other people react. Let's see how the whole like drama around it being this negative thing, like how that all peters out. What happens from it? Does it become more environmentally friendly?
We don't know
when
enough about it, right?
Well, yeah, but it's also like if when it does, is it still going to be a viable thing, or is it going to go away? Is it a fad?
Yeah.
All these things. And I think coming from it now with the time that's gone by, I think it's probably a way of funneling money. I bet it's something to do with money laundering or trafficking or something.
Maybe.
It's a way to hide money. Like for sure, it's something like that. There's no way people are just buying
A bunch
JPEGs.
of whales for $5 million.
Yeah, it is not that. It's not that. I mean, I would be shocked. It's either money laundering or it's people trying to find a way to inflate the worth of that internet, Bitcoin, that kind of currency.
Yeah.
Like crypto stuff. Like it's one of those to me. Like I'm not sure what, but that's my intuition feels like that. Like it's not real.
I think time will tell.
Yeah, like I'm sure that I could put stuff up now and just make quick, easy money over and over and over again with that sort of thing. But we'll see.
Yeah. Next question comes from Sena Prahara. Hi, Dave and Kim. What do you guys do to de-stress, relax after a long day of hard work and taking care of them kids? Thanks for doing these, guys. Keep it 55th Street.
What do we do?
What does that mean?
Well, at the moment, the way that I relax after a long day of work is working until midnight or 1 a.m. and then waking up again at 7 and starting the whole day over.
Yep.
And that's how we relax, is by never relaxing.
What do? I fold laundry until I fall asleep in a pile of laundry while watching TikToks.
Yeah, when the rare chances we've had lately to relax, we just kind of sit in bed.
We try to catch up on
stuff.
Yeah, we try to catch up on some things. We talk.
We watched Midnight Mass.
That
was good.
I watched Great British Bake Off. Love that show.
Zone out stuff is like mainly what we've done.
Yeah. I feel like I'm always trying to stay busy, so I'm always planning the next thing.
I will say this. The one thing that I feel has been a big stress reliever in a weird way has been the electric bikes we got. When we have had the chance to do things with those.
Go outside.
Yeah, like when it's not cold. Those have been really great. They top out at like 27 miles an hour.
Yeah, but we have children on the back,
and
so we're not going 27
Well, I'm just saying they're not like motorcycles.
Yeah.
They're electric bikes, and we have our kids on the back and just riding around and kind of taking paths and things through the woods and going on like a mini adventure with the kids to go get lunch or something. Like that's very relaxing to me.
When I was
I
like
enjoy that.
really consistent, I would do yoga
Mm-hmm.
And that was my meditation time. So, like, those two together.
Yeah.
That was, like, the best de-stress. I always felt good afterwards. I could sleep really good. It was great. And then, like, you know, have a drink, talk, hang out.
Yeah.
Look at each other, laugh.
I really need to, this is not meant to sound in an alcoholic way, but I really feel like I need something like a drink to snap me out of what I'm doing, to snap me out of the mindset of just trying to finish everything, because I always feel like there's so much stuff on the plate that it's like, I just want to get it done. Like, I just want to be done with this.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been that way for over a year now of just constant, nonstop shit.
Mm-hmm.
So to work to the other side of that has been the goal forever.
Mm-hmm.
And I've actually decided to not take on any work for like
The rest of the year,
a couple,
at least.
well, a couple months into next year, maybe like one thing here and there, but like I don't want to do.
That's what you always say.
No, but I mean, the projects that we've had this year have all been around getting a house.
Yeah.
So they've been stacked. Like, there's been projects that I agreed to doing back in February that I'm finishing now. So a lot of those types of things. And then a full-time video game job. So like working on a video game every weekday, full-time, that's pretty intense when you also have freelance and Patreon. And to not have
And a
all
wife
of that.
and children.
Yeah. But to not have all of those things compounded is going to be great.
Yeah, I mean, what are we even going to do? We're going to start working out.
We do not need to have a full-time video game job, a Patreon, and freelance, and a family.
Also,
all
do you
at
guys
once.
like that he includes me in this, saying, like, we don't need to have a full-time video game job? I don't do anything for this video game.
Well, I'm just saying we, as in, we're
The
both
unit.
here dealing with the chaos of whatever life is now.
It's true. Next question comes from David Gay. Hey, Dave. Fellow Dave here. I was recently... Sorry, I don't know why that's so funny to me, because Dave is a very common name, so it's just funny. I was recently listening to your old podcast with Dan from like 8 years ago, where you're both talking about the misery of being in the middle, how you essentially sacrificed having a life for a few years in order to make it. I know you both said that that's not the healthy way to do it, but at the same time, if you really want to shorten the amount of time you were in the middle, I get the feeling I have to do this to an extent. Just wondering if you have any more insight on this topic looking back. I'm also probably not even 10% close to where you guys were at the time of the podcast, so I feel a bit worried about my own progress. It feels kind of daunting to think about. You should absolutely do more podcasts with Dan if y'all ever get the chance to. Absolutely love the dynamic. I will be leaving, and Dan will be replacing me.
Do I have new insight on that? That's tough, because thinking back on those old whatever days of studying and working and trying to figure it out and become something, I don't know if there wasn't another option. Like, yes, you can have a more balanced life, but I think you only go through those years of having that type of energy like once. Like you have that, you're in your 20s energy, workaholic thing, whatever that is.
What if you're not in your 20s and you're just starting your career?
Well, I'm not talking about that. I'm just talking about my insight looking back on it. It's like I think that because of what it was in those circumstances, I think that I wouldn't have done it any different. Like I think that I used those years, and that's just the type of person that I am. I'm very motivated. I'm very oriented in that idea of like having some sort of successful personal thing that I'm doing that's a job that I am, you know, dictating hours on and finding some kind of success in. That was so much a part of me, and still is, that drive to become something and be somebody. It was important to me at the time, and I probably just would have done anything to get there, to have that kind of career that I wanted, and make a life for myself that I wanted. And I knew that it would take sacrifice, and I didn't care that it was unhealthy.
Well, let's
It
put it
didn't
this way
bother
too.
me.
You had opportunity to have a balanced life because you did have a girlfriend during that time,
Yeah.
but the time wasn't spent with her or like,
No.
you know, holidays, family. Like it wasn't spent. Like you were very focused.
Yeah, I did nothing but that.
So like you did have the opportunity to do it, but
Right.
it just wasn't like, it wasn't a priority at the time to have that
No.
other part of your life. And really you were still working very, very long hours and like doing those like 2-day turnaround jobs when we met. And like you had just really started being like, I don't have to do this anymore.
Well, I think there was a good chunk, maybe like a 2-3 year stretch where I really didn't do a whole lot. I just kind of did whatever we needed to do to get by, but I didn't.
Yeah.
I wasn't like super busy. Like we traveled a lot. And
Yeah,
did
but
a
you
lot of
put the
things.
work in so that we could do those things.
Yeah, exactly.
We wouldn't have been able to do those things if you hadn't done that and built that foundation for yourself prior.
Yeah. That's kind of what I always thought, though, was that if I just sacrificed time while I had the energy, the drive, I wanted to do it. If I just put in those hours then, even if it meant missing out on a lot of things, that the back half, the whole rest of my life would be so much easier and things would work out and I'd be able to do what I wanted to do and have the career I wanted and all that. And that's really what happened. I don't know if I would do it any differently.
You know, and it would have been different too if you and I were together at that point in time.
Yeah.
And it's like, not to talk, you know, poorly on anyone, but like, it's not like you had this feeling that you were going to be with this person forever. So it's not like you were missing. You didn't feel as if though you were missing out on like this other big part of your life.
I also didn't feel like I was looking for it. Like
Yeah.
I wasn't being like, oh, I need to have a family now. Now
Yeah.
it's time to start actually being serious about what's going to happen in my 30s and 40s and who am I going to
Right.
be? Do I want to be a dad? Like what's going
Yeah.
on? I didn't have that in my head. I was still thinking of, I'm nowhere near a place where that's a thing that I could even
Like
consider.
it wasn't even on your radar, right? Like
Right,
you're
like,
just like,
what am I going to be? Just struggling all the time and having no more time and still trying to figure it out. I didn't want to do that. So as hard as that sort of thing is, there's this idea that's in the art community of don't overwork yourself. And the way people talk about that is as if somebody's making you do it, as if there's this outside pressure saying you need to kill yourself. And it's more of this thing of how they perceive other artists having done it. And they think that by virtue of that artist doing it that way, that they have to do it that way. And it's this pressure of you have to kill yourself and work crazy hours in order to become something.
injure yourself or whatever. It's not,
Right.
you're not putting enough hours in if you don't have that repetitive,
But
whatever injury, right?
Yeah, but the problem with me was that I wanted to do it. It wasn't, nobody was making me do it. I wanted to put in those hours. I liked beating myself up. I liked the struggle of it. I really like when things are really hard. And it doesn't just have to do with art. I like that in all things. I don't want to do things that are easy. And I don't think I have. Like, I don't like to, I like to hang out now. Like I like when we go on vacation and I do nothing involved in art at all. Like I
Work
just
hard,
shut
play
off.
hard.
No. I will like be aggressively boring.
Didn't even let me have that.
but it's like I can shut it off. Like
Yeah.
I feel like I've always been able to do that. I could turn it off and just do other things. But
Yeah, you're not like one of those weirdos like where we go out to dinner and you're like,
drawing.
I just gotta draw.
No, I don't care about that.
No.
Like, I don't. Outside of sitting here right now, I'm never drawing.
No, God, if that was like
you
just,
don't see me
if
like
that
in
was
the
your
living room
personality, I'd be like,
drawing. Yeah, like there are people
can I
who
pick up some hobbies, please?
there are people who go and like sketch strangers and places and things to like study and whatever. And I am not that at all. Like
No.
I am not that person in any way. I'm like as much of a lame businessman about art as you could get, where I just am, when I'm here, I'm doing it. Anywhere else, it's like you don't even know I'm an artist. So yeah, I don't think I would do it any different. And I'm putting a lot of kind of like emphasis on this point because I hear it so much of people saying, like, thinking that they need to do that in order to do it. I'm not saying you need to do that. I'm saying that I needed to. It's part of my personality. I like being that. And I knew it was getting unhealthy because I'd be so depressed. And that's when I stopped doing it that much.
Yeah.
And I would take a break and I would be whatever, or I'd be like, you know, wanting to just be alone rather than around people. Like when I found too much comfort in just being alone, I was like, oh, this is probably unhealthy, that I'm starting to really like lean into this where it's my preferred way of being, to be a hermit. And I'm like, no, I'm not like that. Like I have no problem standing in front of a crowd and talking and things. But
Yeah. Don't kill yourself, but do it. You can do it.
yeah.
Oronoro has a pretty long post, so I'm just going to read through it, okay? Hey guys, Dave, one of my favorite things about your Patreon is how you're such an open book with your techniques and thoughts as an artist. I think it's rad as hell how much work you and Kim have put into this place so far. You've made this Patreon an outstanding resource for learning. Big thanks. Fire emoji. For people who want to get, also thank you. For people who want to get good, the artist currently known as Dave Raposa is a great example of a self-taught illustrator who made it through the hardest part of the grind. I've attempted to use mystical means to siphon away your work ethic and combine it with my own powers. Since all of my blood magic has failed so far, I'm reduced to the pettiest tactic of all, asking nicely. With that said, would you consider providing something like an ongoing interactive version of your semi-famous art schedule? For instance, twice monthly drawing or painting targets for various fundamentals, along with some guidelines or tips. There could be a Discord channel for patrons to post their work. And if you want to get really crazy, you could do occasional critique videos and demonstrations. You can say no, I understand you're busy. I realize this will come across as overly hand-holdy to some people, and I know that you can't plan your way... Oh, sorry, I skipped a line. And I know that you can't plan your way around the hard work it takes to get somewhere as an artist. Still, I'm the kind of person who is the most productive when I have an assignment, especially when that assignment comes from someone who has personal experience with developing professional skills. And also, feedback from people who know their stuff really helps. Regardless of your answer, I'm no quitter. So if the inside of your skull develops an itching or burning sensation that doesn't subside for more than a week, or if your toilet water turns an alarming color after you've done your business, don't worry about it. Your curse of free will is soon to become a distant memory as my dark star rises. Enjoy your weekend.
Well, thank you.
I did that on one breath.
I don't think that's a bad idea, but it would have to be something implemented in a way that's regularly executable. So I don't know how you do that. Maybe like a rotating thing, but I do like that idea of, instead of it being constant challenges and things, to have something that's also productive. That was my idea with the PDF thing that I was working on, was I was going to include also like a schedule, like a revised schedule and other resources like that. That thing just took forever just because the game job I've been working on since June was supposed to end in August, and they were just happy with everything, so they just extended my contract
Indefinitely.
for the moment.
Yeah.
So
It's
I
an
don't know.
unknown ending.
I don't know when that's going to end, but thankfully everything else is going to end. So I will have more time again to... I really just am waiting for the moment where I can sit down at this desk and I don't have to do something right away.
The other
Because
part
then
of...
I'll be able to do more of those things.
Right. And I mean, we're still integrating me and like my workflow into how this Patreon is going to work.
Right.
And just to make it, the best for you guys, and so that you guys get the most out of it, and so that Dave and I have more side by side time as far as like working, because we're kind of just passing things back and forth, and then we do these videos together. As far as like work stuff goes, obviously we live together. That's different. But I mean, we've kind of thrown around the idea of something like your Gumroad tutorials and or like a school of some sort, because that is something that Dave truly does enjoy.
Teaching is what I like doing.
You really do enjoy that, and I think that's something that you are good at, and I think that's why people do, your stuff resonates with them, because you are really good at explaining things in a way that people can understand it, and you don't just say, I don't know, I just do it, or maybe sometimes you do, but for the most part, I feel like that is something that we want to get into, and it may not be immediately, and thank you for using your words and asking nicely. That's what we say to our 2-year-old. So eventually, it's not something that's going to be your wish isn't going to be granted right away, but
we're kind of putting stuff together in a slow way.
Yeah.
Of what this is going to be.
All of it is a work in progress. I mean, we're putting stuff out to stay regular with the Patreon, but that doesn't include all the work that we're doing aside from that for future. Yes. So yeah, eventually. And if you are controlling him with any blood spells, please don't get rid of his cute toes. This next one is from Craig Herbert. Hey Dave and Kim, pineapple on pizza, yes or no?
Sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes.
I actually grew up with pineapple pizza. My dad would get the Hawaiian, like ham and pineapple, and then we'd also get pineapple soda with it. And then the Cape Cod chips.
Nice.
When I was a kid, and I liked the combination of it, so I doubled down on the pineapple as a kid. Friday nights, so pineapple nights.
Sweet and salty, baby. Zach Thornhill. Hey Dave and sometimes I don't realize, because I haven't been in like a work environment for a while, and there's like not a lot of adults that I interact with, that like I just quote too many things that other people might not know.
Well,
and they just think that it's part of my...
That's a TikTok. I even had to think about that with you saying, baby.
Because like...
What's that from? And then I was like, oh, right, it's that dude who's making believe he's a Marine on TikTok. Oh, hoorah, baby. Yeah,
because like I feel like it just comes out, and then people just think that I talk that way, Okay, sorry. Zach Thornhill says, hey Dave and Kim, there was a big hole in my heart where your painting process videos used to be. But now there is no hole anymore. Looking forward to everything coming from this channel. The process videos are so useful to learn from and improve. Thank you very much. That is a very nice comment.
Thank you. Yeah, that was honestly, it's been harder to do the Patreon, because normally what I would do is like double the content, put out updates on the painting, and then also put up a kind of commentary thing over my process, so that I'd have multiple things to share throughout a piece. And that was part of the whole thing. And then my computer shit the bed. So, I mean, it's such a relief to have this new setup.
We're happy to fill any holes, your heart or otherwise. Lucas Vasut, and thank you guys for sticking with us. We are almost done. I know this is running long, but we want to do it in one part. So next question is from Lucas Vasut. Hey, Dave and Kim. First of all, thanks for everything you are doing for this Patreon. I learned so much because of you. Because of you, not me. I'm not doing anything. Here's my question. How do you prepare your illustrations for print? I'm doing some work for a client, and the art is going to be printed kind of like Magic the Gathering cards. I paint in RGB, and when I try to see how it looks in CMYK, it looks like crap. Colors can be washed out, dull. I'd love to know a better way how to approach this for future clients as well as my own prints. Thanks, Lucas. Some people talked about that on the Discord as well. They were talking about that. But
I had a similar experience early on in my career where a lot of my stuff, when it went to print, would either print too dark or the colors would be weird. And I found that as long as I think this just really came from improving. But as long as my values were reading, then when it went into print, that would be translatable. Like it would still read well as long as my values were good. So scale of light to dark, as long as that was all there and it looked good, and I wasn't in too many midtones and too flat with the midtones where everything was kind of the same, and I was relying solely on color to pop things. If I relied more on value, that things would pop naturally, and when it printed, it would still have the value, even if the colors were slightly off. Because sometimes you can play, like, let's just put it in this perspective, I guess. If you took like a neon blue in your painting and then like a neon red, and they were right next to each other in the painting, and it was part of a spell or something, and it goes to print, that blue might not show up. That blue might look gray and weird, and that red will look really dull too. And it'll just look like kind of a weird mess where it was very exciting and full of contrast in the digital file. So the way to kind of get around that is to, number one, kind of keep in mind what colors go away when it goes to print, and maybe don't use a lot of them. So avoid those bright neon blues and bright neon red colors and things, and you'll get a feel for it as you go, but you'll see what will still show up over time. I just instinctively now avoid those colors as major points of my paintings because I know that they won't come across in the print. But most places, that was a train stopping. Most places that are printing things like Magic does, or Wizards of the Coast, when they take the file that you give them, they will adjust it for print, and then that printable file will go out, and it's generally pretty accurate now. I think that they've gotten a lot better at the color correction side, so you don't have to do a ton of that on your own. But if you are making your own prints, that does come into play, where you have to really think about it. That's why I mentioned in a lot of my high-res posts on here that you should have the person who's printing your image, whatever you're doing with it, make sure that they've adjusted the print to work on their printer so that it actually shows the real colors, because that is a major problem. But
some people said to like paint in CMYK.
You can, but you don't want to sacrifice. How are most people going to see your image? How do you want people to see your image? CMYK can be very limiting, and you don't get the full colors that you want. So if you want to have a piece that's going to look great in your portfolio and use the breadth of all the colors that you can use, then I would do that, because that's going to live with you forever, potentially.
So what about the value? Like, do you need to start with grayscale?
No.
Too? You can do it with just...
You can do things where you can preview your image in grayscale just to kind of see where it's at. Like,
as far as values, how they read?
Yeah, see how it looks. Do an adjustment layer on top of the whole thing that's just a saturation. Turn saturation all the way down and just see how are my values reading. And then you can also switch your painting over into CMYK mode in Photoshop to just see how it'll look when it prints too, and kind of get an idea of what maybe you should be leaning towards. But yeah, that's mostly what I would say. Learn to work within safe colors and work with values that read well, regardless of color.
Okay. Next question from Rav Art. Hey Dave and Kim, I'm restructuring my schedule so that I can have 20 hours a week to focus on learning character design, concept art. These 20 hours are for character design alone. I have other time in my schedule allotted for fundamentals, anatomy, figure drawing, portraiture, and still life painting. For context, I teach and keep a studio at an atelier on the side.
Oh, wow.
That's a lot.
That's a lot.
Plate is full. My question, how should I spend these 20 hours a week? Again, that's for concept character design. How can I get the most value out of this time so that I'm able to start taking on jobs? Dave, I know that you've said that concept art is the most lucrative field, more so than comic cover illustration or tabletop gaming commissions. I also really love and enjoy the craft. So it's not solely about the money. How can I get started learning this stuff? My ultimate goal would be to do things in the vein of Dark Souls, Bloodborne, and Tactics Ogre. How can I use the 20 hours a week I have to get a place where I can really start to grow my career? Thanks as always. This Patreon has been so valuable to me, and I really appreciate everything you both do.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
So that's not bad. You have 4 hours a day, 5 days a week.
Mm.
That's pretty good.
Or about 3 every day.
Yeah. How would I spend it if I were doing that? For character design, one of the things that I wish that I had done earlier was really get into dynamic posing, get into showing off a character's character. I didn't really start to think about that until I started doing comics, where comics you have to convey so much through body language, and a lot of a personality is body language. And I think that that is something that's overlooked, where some of the best concept artists do that very well. There's so much personality in the face, the way that they are posed. Maybe they're seated a certain way, or maybe they're standing awkwardly or confidently. There's so much that you can get across before you even start to design the costume. So it's like understanding who the character is so much more than just what they're wearing. You know, you're not just pasting clothes onto a doll that's just sitting there. You want to add something to it, add more life than what's there. So a lot of that actually informs where you lean with your design, because your design can start to go more towards, oh, this is feeling like characters more villainous, whatever, conniving. Maybe they're just kind of a creep or something. Like there's just something about them that will take your design in a different direction. I think that that's one thing that I would study gestures for. Get like a lot of poses and things in mind, and the character reference. You know, like what I would do is go on to something, and maybe you already do this, go on something like Pinterest and put together a board of that sort of thing, like models and poses and character actors and poses and things, and start to make a huge collection of visually interesting people. Have that whole thing exist for you to just have a spark to go off of, and then put together boards similarly to that for each kind of idea you have. Are you combining some hyper sci-fi thing with some medieval, whatever, cowboy, sci-fi, whatever? Like, what are you doing? What's new that you're doing? Combining ideas is great for that. Just taking contrasting things from different time periods, finding a way to bring them together in a certain shape language. How do you take the cowboy shape language and make it sci-fi western? Or how do you take that shape language and make it the feudal Japan? How do you do that with every other culture? Mix and match, find different ways to combine things to create something new that already exists but maybe hasn't been done before. Take that, mix it with an archetypal character in a pose that gets across that archetype, and you have something there that's the seed of an idea that can maybe grow and become other things. And once you have a theme, then you can start to build out your designs, and maybe you have a handful of archetypes you're trying to nail down for a game project that doesn't exist. Give yourself parameters to work within, and then in those small boxes, see how crazy you can get. See what you can find from that place, that starting point. Those are things that help me a lot. It's just kind of narrowing my field of vision on a specific kind of ideas, and then building out. Everything outside of that is fundamental. So posing and whatever, like reference, like you sound like you have a general idea of all those things. You said you have space and atelier, that you probably are part of those types of classes with anatomy and like long form sitting and drawing the same kind of pose forever from a model, or I don't know exactly how your atelier is structured, but I'm sure you do that a lot, like studies. So I think that as long as you have that type of fundamentals down, then that's going to be the other side of it, is just getting creative and letting yourself get a little looser with the idea of what a character can be. But yeah, hands really important, posing with hands, that sort of thing. I would look at a lot of, and this might sound biased just because he's a friend of mine, but I would look at the way like Marko Đurđević did a lot of his pencil work. Like if you go to like Marko Đurđević and check out his old like Genesis pencils, there's so much character in those designs, and it goes beyond the way that the actual design looks. A lot of it is the personality of the character that is mainly what I'm talking about. That will convey a lot more than just simply, here's a costume they're wearing. Because a lot of those costumes that he would draw would just basically be S&M people in gas masks hanging out in the desert, and you're like, who cares? But because of the way that he drew them, their anatomy, the weirdness of them, their pose, it's like that sort of thing. Like that was a lot of his characters. They were like, with like crinkly fingers. That will, lead you down a whole other path. And people see those sorts of things. And I think that when they see strong character in character design, that's when you start to get more work. And yes, it is a lucrative job. I think that once you have a contract like that and it goes on for extended periods, you start to get a name in that kind of field, you can turn that into a whole career.
Yes. Next question. Alfred Manzano. Hey, Dave and Kim. Happy Thanksgiving. I finally thought of a question. In terms of concept work for clients, do clients always want concept work to be nicely presented, or it just depends? Like if you have ideas, pencil sketches, or doodled, do you always make the effort of cleaning them and putting them on a typical presentable file?
No, you don't. You can get away with being pretty loose. Concept art in and of itself is the sketch phase for the most part. So it's ideas. You're coming up with concepts, like it's in the name.
Yeah.
So the idea is number one. Execution would be great, but ideas.
Who's seeing it too? It's not
somebody who just sees ideas all the time.
Yeah,
they understand.
Like it's not like I mean, you're putting it in your portfolio eventually, so if you want to make it tight for that, right?
Yeah, but that's what happens. That's kind of the misconception people have about concept art, I would say.
Nobody sees concept art really.
Well, they do, but they see the polished version that goes in art books, which is usually refined. But the initial ideas that get those things going before it needs to be rendered so that a modeler can take it, those are all very loose. So feel free to be very loose with those. A lot of people just use like photographs and combine them and then draw over photos just to get across an idea in 2 seconds. And then they'll do the finished thing after that. So you can be very loose with concept art, and it's expected, I would say.
Hunter Whitfield says, Hi, Dave and Kim. I have a question in regards to memorizing anatomy and proportions, or really any visual library expansion. Right now, I spend a lot of time copying anatomy from books and then attempting active recall after, as well as the next couple of days until I can recreate it fairly well without reference. However, I get worried about forgetting material and not knowing when to move on. I know Kim was a nursing student, so if she has any studying thoughts, I'd love to hear them as well. Thank you for all you do.
No, I have a problem with my memory, generally speaking, where I don't remember information just like one for one. I have to actively participate in the studies to like get that in my head. I have to repeat the drawings over and over and over again. I don't have any kind of photographic memory, unfortunately. Like somebody like Kim Jung-gi can, we've talked about that. He can draw like the motor on a scooter from the 70s and just kind of, here it is. It's fucking perfect. Or, close, because he has those skills. For me, I just have to repeat things over and over again until they just get locked in. Like I remember somebody saying, why do you draw ears like that? And it made me laugh, because I was like, I always wonder that too.
I remember that.
And then I started just drawing ears a lot, and I was like, I really got to figure out how to draw fucking ears. This person's dead on. And I started just drawing ears, and I have to just draw them over. And I still will like Google ear when I want to draw an ear just to make sure, because I'm like, when they said it, it struck such a chord. I was like, I haven't even been thinking about that, but they're so right. So like my memory slips all the time. Like even though I studied those things, I have to come back to them over and over again. I'm trying to. What was the other part of that?
So, just like any type of visual library and expansion, like, are there any things that you do to like help memorize? So, like, let's say like you're drawing, I don't know, a glass.
I will say that I look at anatomy specific, because you're so used to seeing people that's the thing that looks the worst all the time. So
like, what about proportions?
I measure things against each other. That's the, I would say that's the number one thing that I do to memorize body parts, like to get all the structure right, is I do measurements in my head. I know that if like the arm is this long, then this is here. I know that if the shoulders here, I know like the chest is here, and I know how this connects and swings over the bicep, the muscles. And
what did you do to learn that?
Just measuring. I'm saying like, I don't have the memory to like memorize it perfectly, like where it is. So I know that if I'm drawing the proportions a certain way, I know like generally how big a thing should be versus another part of the body.
Okay.
So I can like kind of structure that with lines across and like perspective and place things accurately. So I have to break things down into measurements in order to kind of visualize it in my head of like where things are going to fall on a character. And that's like the only trick I have is that pretty much is distance between objects and their size relative to one another is like how I'll place everything in an image. So that's kind of why I use like a lot of the Loomis technique of measuring by heads and mapping out the face the way Loomis does. Aside from that, it's just repetition. Repetition will go a long way with me. I just have to be consistent. So I have like I said about the Pinterest thing, I have like a Pinterest board of just anatomy. Sometimes I'll just open that and leave it, on a window here so that it's just there and I see it. And just by virtue of seeing it and observing it and just trying to take it in, that'll help me get that knowledge more in place. Aside from that, having models, having like that little figure that I have of Jason Statham's naked body, posing that, taking reference photos of it with lighting.
He's in one of those baskets over there.
Yeah, that'll help me. And
I think that
anatomy tools in general.
Well, and recreating it from like the recall afterwards is good, but you still have to like compare it, right? Which I'm sure that sounds like what you're doing, but
yeah, I'm just trying to. It's the same way I would draw a map of the world.
Yeah, I would say like that's very similar to how I would study like nursing stuff. I would be like, my friend and I would quiz each other. So we're trying to recall all the information, and then we would check ourselves. And then sometimes, with nursing, it's different because a lot of it is application. So like, yeah, we had to learn anatomy and physiology going into nursing school, but never ever have I been in a hospital room with a patient on the bed and the doctor go, "Where's the bicep?" So like that kind of just goes out the window like after a little while, you know what I mean? Like it just becomes second nature for most of it, but like I don't know, like a lot of that, like some of the basic stuff is just the foundation that you build off of.
Right.
And, like I couldn't name every muscle in the body.
Yeah.
I could name more than you, but I couldn't name every muscle. It's just not part of like, I think recall is really good. I think that repetition is really good. Those are all ways that I used to study in nursing school. I think that if you really want to like get technical, especially like with like posing and whatever, I think learning how muscles work, that might help, because that was always like a thing for me, was like I couldn't just know the answer. I had to know like the 3 steps in between the question and the answer of like, how did we get here? Like, but why? And that's why like anatomy and physiology, like the physiology part of like why this disease process happened this way, or like what causes this symptom of this medication when it's metabolized in your body. Like those are the steps that I'd have to take to get to that conclusion.
To like ingrain it.
Yeah, to like I'd have to make that connection. So I think maybe learning how those muscles work, that might help.
In application, I come back to the comic thing. This is the last thing I'll say on that. Is as much studying as I did, as much work as I tried to do in the beginning of fundamentals, nothing helped me as much as drawing 900 something pages of comics. Even if the anatomy in the comics wasn't very good, I still was trying to get somewhere, even if it wasn't like perfect. And because I just did it so much, I naturally got better at it.
This is the last question. Thank you everybody for sticking with us. You guys are troopers. You guys are the best. Conan. Hey Dave, would you have any advice on starting a comic and putting it out online? What was the process timeline of creating Steve Lichman? Boom.
Okay, so here is my loose idea. What we did was we were just talking on Skype one day while I was working, me and my buddy Dan, and we were making fun of fantasy, and we'd do voices and things and just kind of joke around about like what we would do if you were a lich or something like that in this stupid scenario, how in every video game there's just some boss hanging out waiting for this maniac to come down and kill him, and that's their sole purpose, is to just be fodder for somebody's game. And like how stupid that idea was, just that for all of the lore that exists in video games, that part of it is still so dumb. It's like they don't think about that part of it. Like, what are you doing? Like, why?
I'm just
like,
waiting for somebody to come
like,
battle me.
Yeah, this monster who definitely doesn't want to die. You know, it's like he's fucking setting up this really cool quest for you and your friends. It's like it's in his house.
Did you just wink?
Yeah, and at the end of it,
really
he's gonna get
face.
killed. It's like, yeah, that's great. It's just so dumb. So that's what we would joke about specifically when we were working on fantasy, and the Lich thing was like, he's putting on this show, he's doing his job, then he's like, just fucking kill me. So it's just this one-off idea of an encounter between the boss and a warrior guy. And I had done some comic stuff before that, but that were kind of in vain with that. No, I did this one called Insecure Warrior.
Oh yeah.
That was like a jokey fantasy comic.
Yeah.
That's it's still on one of my my comic site. If you go to daveraposa.com, click on comics, you'll see the link there. So we did that one-off thing, put it online, and we put it up on Tumblr, and it just blew up. It got like 30,000 likes and whatever. I forget. It got shared a lot. And then we were like, oh, that's pretty cool. Let's do like the follow-up to that one. What else would happen? Did that one, put it up on Tumblr again. It blew up. And then we were like,
this is something.
Yeah, this is something. What else is funny about that? And then we just kept kind of adding to the joke, and that was really it. We were just, this is fantasy, but what if we just did dumb stuff? Like, what if with all the potential of fantasy, we just added Dracula? And like, how fucking boring would that be? Like, how cool a dungeon in D&D is, and just a vampire in a cape is just so lame. So like, that would be funny if it was another main character is just this dumb Dracula character. So we put it in, a dumb joke about how vampires are essentially rapists. And then the other joke was like, what's the funny thing? Like, there's always ghosts in the dungeon. What if we just put like a dead New York City police officer down there who was basically the person who takes care of them all? Like, they're a bunch of dumb kids, and and he's like the father figure. So that was how it kind of started. It blew up. Like every time we added to it, it felt like it just kept going, and people kept asking for more of it. And then I was like, well, what if we took the little collection of things that we just did and put it in front of more people? So we put it on Imager, which I guess you could still put your stuff on Imager, but you probably put it on like Reddit now or something like that. Just in front of, you want to put it in front of people. And we put up all of them in front of everybody, the bigger platform we could find with all the comics together. And it just really blew up. I think we got 500,000 hits on that one or something like that. It was a lot.
I mean, honestly, TikTok is the way to go. Everybody and their
Yeah,
freaking mom
TikTok.
uses TikTok, and the chances of you going viral on something, like,
As long as it's
so,
quality.
But even if it's not, like,
Well,
there's
I just mean that, like, as long as there's something to it,
yeah,
you don't need to be like a famous person on TikTok to blow up.
yeah, it's true. And I feel like people even do that thing where they're just like, I just want to see how many days it takes for me to get viral, and they will upload the same video day after day after day until it shows up on the For You page for enough people to like to go viral. I've seen that. It's like day 48 of me trying to go viral, and they just do the same thing.
Right.
And then they get known for a thing. So if you want to do that, that's like, I mean,
Yeah.
there are tactics. There are for sure tactics. And maybe some of them seem cheap, but all you need is to get an audience once.
Right. Well, I think that any way that you can get your comic in front of people is important. But you could put out kind of a feeler thing for it and see where it goes. That's kind of what I'm doing right now with that Veil comic that I've been working on. Is I want to just put out this one thing that can just exist within itself and then see where that goes and then go from there. Because I wrote a huge script for this comic Starvale, but it's huge. And I always do big things. And like, I don't want everything that I do to just be giant.
No, there needs to be like some small things in between so that you also have the satisfaction of completion.
Yeah. I mean, that was
You need to complete.
we have an idea, and I don't know if I mentioned it on this, about the like zine thing. I think I did.
I think you like glossed over it real quick, but
Right. That was the idea, was to like put out chapters the same way that you'd taken like a manga before it becomes a volume book, is that you would get it in like a magazine and you'd get chapters of each manga that you liked. So there'd be like a few different mangas in one book. I was thinking of doing that with like the comic ideas that I have, which is a lot. So I was like, what if we just did all of them and just kind of sequentially did them? Like, what if, one after the other, or they come out in these little books? So that was the thought. So might still do that, just kind of trying to find the time and really just gonna have to plan for it. But I think that there's so many ways of doing it that there isn't any one perfect route for you. The way that I would say it still exists, similar to what we did, was that Reddit thing, and then also putting it on a Kickstarter. Kickstarter in and of itself, it's like, yeah, that's how you get your project funded and you make money and people can basically pre-order what you're doing and then buy it. But the act of having a Kickstarter is like a marketing campaign because it gets people involved and it gets people wanting to support a thing. They become kind of loyal to you because they're a part of the process. They see you behind the scenes a little bit. And then also they want to see it made, so it starts to grow and it gets shared online, and then people learn about the comic that way. There's a lot of benefits to it. And that will help you actually market the thing more than even, your social media might, which is how it worked for Steve. Like, nobody on my Twitter and nobody on my Instagram really wanted to see Steve. They wanted to see my paintings. So that didn't really work there. I got the whole audience I got for Steve was from Imager and like Reddit and stuff like that. Like, it had nothing to do with my social media. Social media helped like a little bit, but artists didn't buy the books. Like, I saw the names of everybody who bought the books. Like, I knew where those were coming from. I didn't see anybody buy it really that knew me. Like it
Mm-hmm.
was all the like the source of traffic for that comic just came from other groups. Like it was not
Mm-hmm.
that, and I would see this whole different audience come out of nowhere, and they wouldn't even know I did paintings.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't get to really leverage my social media accounts at the time. Yeah, I think that's a good approach, is to just use those kinds of platforms and take advantage of TikTok, take advantage of whatever you can to get it in front of people. You want to be on those sites like Tapas. You want to be on the site, any of those like comic reader sites where people post like regular web comics. You'll find a lot of them. There's a bunch of those kinds of sites that just have those vertical scrolling comics. So those places are a great starting point before you move into making a book or something,
Mm-hmm.
just to get an audience going.
What is tapas? That is that what you're saying?
Yeah, Steve's on there, and we
I
had
thought that was tapastic.
they changed it.
Oh, okay.
So that
Where have I been?
that site, we'd get a lot of views on that. Like I think for what it was, we would get like 30,000 views on a comic or something, which is it's good. So those sites
That's
are all
really good.
helpful. Anywhere you can post your comic stuff where people want to read comics is where you want to be, and then have all of that traffic funnel into where you're funding the thing. You can do that through Patreon, that people will pay you when a comic comes out, each issue per post type of deal. You can do one of those kinds of Patreons, or do a monthly where you share your process and things. Anything you can do to kind of build some sort of group around your project is really what I'm saying. Get people involved
Yeah.
any way you can, and people feel good when they feel like they found something. Like, oh, this is mine. Like,
It's that feeling of being like
The
nobody
band.
knows about this song. Yeah. Yeah, you know.
well, there's one last question, by the way.
Oh, there was.
Yeah. So what were you gonna say?
What was the last question?
It was from Colorblind Draws. It said, Dave, if someone close to you passes away and you get to keep their phone, if people keep messaging the deceased individual, should one reply just to spook them out? I was gonna say,
Depends on who it is.
depends who it is, and if Dan died, then I might do it with Dan's phone.
If my mom died, I would do it with hers.
Yeah. Yeah, I would definitely do that. I mean, I did things with Dan where I made a montage video. There's this Van Halen song, "Why Can't This Be Love?" I don't even know if that's the title. That's just the lyrics. It might be a shorter version of that. Look up that song and listen to it. It was a montage of Dan's life. It just pictures that I put together in a slideshow of us hanging out and him doing stuff. And I put like "Rest in Peace," the years, and there was no joke there. I just thought it would be funny to post on the internet, so I posted it on Facebook, and I just said like, "I can't believe it," or whatever. Like this, I forget. Rest in peace. I just said something stupid, and Dan got a bunch of phone calls to his phone of people crying, leaving messages saying they couldn't believe it and whatever.
Which
I thought everybody would get it, that it was a joke, but no, they didn't get it.
I mean, on your 30th birthday.
Yeah, you had a funeral for me.
Mm-hmm.
But I was the only one who was tricked.
No, because Dan posted that picture, and a bunch of people were like, "This can't be real."
Oh, right, yeah.
That was his payback.
That's true. Well, yeah, I think that's all of them.
Okay. Well,
Thank you.
thank you everyone for the questions. We haven't really been getting as many questions as like the first couple times I recorded with you, which makes it nice so that we could do it in one part. But some of the questions are now starting to repeat. So instead of having a redundant Q&A, we're kind of thinking about reformatting our question videos.
Yeah, we were thinking it'd be fun to do some really targeted ones where we put out an actual topic to ask questions about.
Yeah,
So
and that
that
way we can delve
can
deeper because we
Hammer
do.
it in.
Well, we also like we're touching on every single thing, but we're not really getting into like anything really deep. And I think that in order to like, and these videos get so long because we do want to talk about these things. So I think that if we had something that we can kind of ramble on about and then have more specific questions, I think that would be better for everyone. And I think that like we can just take a little bit of a break from these like traditional Q&As where some of the questions are getting redundant, and hopefully you guys don't feel pressured to ask a question just so that we have a video. I feel like that might be the case a little bit, but I think that it would be nice just to take a break from these traditional Q&As of just like anything goes, and we'll eventually get back to it. But probably the next couple Q&A videos that you guys are going to see are going to be more on like targeted, very specific topics. We'll give you the topic prompt, and then you can ask questions about that.
Yeah, we have a whole list of things that we put together for what we could do for the future Q&As, just to switch it up. Make
it more interesting for you guys, so that you guys don't also feel like our day ones. Been like, I heard this already.
Yeah.
He answered this 3 times in like the last Q&A. So, yeah, I think that will be nice for everyone.
Yeah.
But as always, thank you guys. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you for all your support, and we'll talk to you in the next Q&A, or I'll talk to you in the next video anyway, because I'm probably going to do a voiceover of process stuff.
Yeah.
But
sounds good.
We'll be around.
Okay. Bye, guys.
Bye.